Hey, you know that guy who just before the green flag keys up his mic and asks, "Anybody got a setup?" Well, this is him. This is Adam, and hey, Adam needs some help. On the other hand, this guy over here, this is Steve. Steve is a solid racer and he knows his way around the garage. Steve's problem is time. With a job and a family, he can't find enough time to build competitive setups and to race as often as he likes. But as luck would have it, Steve knows a secret. He lets the Majors Garage crew chiefs do the setup work so he can focus on the racing. At majorsgarage.com, Steve can get setups for over 60 cars on the iRacing service. So no matter what series he wants to jump into, he is covered. Anybody really should tell Adam. See you at the garage.
Going quite that long, the prestige of a win here will be an allure hard to resist. It's time to get ready for the Majors Spa 2 hours, and you'll see it all live here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is Jake Sperry. Behind the scenes is our director, Christian Duploy, being assisted by Daniel Costello, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Spa is a big track with a lot to go over, so let's head to our track guide to learn more. Welcome to Spa-Francorchamps. Less than an hour's drive east from the German border, this Belgian track has come to define racing for many different eras in the sport. It's no wonder it continues to entrance drivers when you look at the stats. The 7 kilometers over the course of a lap includes more than 330 feet in elevation change as it weaves its way through the Ardennes forest. Packed into this is 19 turns, some of which are considered among the most famous in the world of racing. Corners like La Source and Blanchemont have been on the lips of drivers for decades. But by far the most notorious is Eau Rouge and Rétillon. Typically referred to in name by just the first section, it dips low and swings left, then compresses and climbs to the right up a massive hill. The sequence ends with a completely blind crest that sweeps to the left and leads onto the incredibly long Kemmel Straight. The bravery required to be fast through there will pay off towards one of the most popular passing spots at Lecombe. Eau Rouge is exemplary of the rest of the circuit though. Most of the turns are incredibly fast and many include much of that signature elevation change. As jaw-dropping as the track is, you have to remember that this is the modern truncated layout. The old one, raced until 1979, was 14 kilometers in length, yet carried an average speed of 150 miles per hour. Present-day safety measures do cut down on the danger, but even in recent history, the circuit has proven deadly. It's clear why this track continues to be revered and respected by racers the world round. Well, Jake, we got a century of history here. It's one of the classic venues.
It's not just a classic venue, it's one of the great all-around venues when it comes to motorsport racing, as we sit ourselves then between the towns of Spa and Francorchamps. You've got the town of Spa down at the La Source hairpin, you've got the town of Francorchamps up over the top of Lecombe and down the road. It is one of the most fantastic places to go and watch racing, and also one of the great places to watch cycling as well, as Liège-Bastogne-Liège always comes through in every classic season, and that'll be coming up in the next couple of months. But to this track and what it means and how important it is in terms of a battleground track, these drivers today understand that this circuit has 2 great places to make passes today. Up into Lecombe at turn 5 and then along through Blanchemont into the chicane at turn 18. Everywhere else is either a half chance or a case of following in line. And with some of the revised elements of this circuit that we've seen for 2024 and into 2025, they've got a bit more margin for error up the famous Eau Rouge and Rétillon corner. And they've also got the chance to know that it's a little bit more difficult through a couple of other corners out there. Truly, it's still one of the most difficult challenges out there on the iRacing service, but it's one that drivers know each and every time, especially with the iRacing 24 hours of Spa, where the GT3 vehicles also get a very nice workout.
Certainly one of the fantastic combos that you see here. The actual 24 hours of Spa does use these GT3 cars competing out here. Now, if we take a look at the championship, starting, of course, with the Drivers Championship, Trevor Vrosky leading by only 25 points, but it's still very early in the season. It's 60 back from the lead for Garen Batten, with Oscar Fredrickson also following up. Jesper and Oscar kind of part of that Swedish army that has invaded lately and have certainly been a real challenge up at the top. Look out for today being a big decider. With it being single class, it could separate many of the drivers on this board. But that, of course, is just the drivers' standing shakes. We also have a teams championship that they run in this series.
Yes, we do, and there's no surprises that SimRace Sweden Esports are on the top, 11.99 to their name, 100 clear of Fusion Gold, Euro, and Dogbear, who find themselves in third. It's then the silver team of Fusion Silver that find themselves into play, with Composite Performance fifth and Udox Daisy in sixth. All the teams beyond fifth position are one or two driver efforts out there, with the likes of Fusion Bronze, Baby Metal, hashtag Not a Cult Racing in eighth position, Connection Lost Racing in ninth, and Team KXR, who round out the top 10 in the European team standings.
As for today's race itself, it's actually pretty simple. As we said, 2 hours. We're racing GT3 class cars, so there's a lot of different makes to choose from. That'll be a talking point throughout. Which car will be strong today, or cars potentially. And they have a spare waiting in pit lane. Now, that said, if you can get away with fewer pit stops, you really want to do it, because this is the endurance layout. We'll also go over that when we talk about the pit stop. So it'll be extra crushing if you have to make an extra visit down there. So watch out for drivers who find themselves under the gun on that one, as they are just in the final moments of the warm-up. The grid has already been set. They've already had qualifying, Jake. So now it's basically down to just doing the last finishing touches on the car and hope that you're ready.
Yes, so they've had 2 hours effectively to get themselves sorted. They pre-qualify into these races here in the Major Series, so that gives them that almighty opportunity to learn about the circuit as they put the practice in. But then when they get into the race, they get 2 hours to understand these weather conditions out there at the moment, and currently it's showing as dry here today, which will be great news for a lot of these drivers. We go on board with Stephen Verveyen through the final 38 seconds of warm-up, and I think that these drivers will know what's in front of them. It is just a pure 2 hour race, so that's going to come down to a fact whether it's going to be one stop or one stop with a little splash and dash. And if there's anything to note about this circuit here, Joe, this and the endurance layout might just be the longest pit lane in iRacing.
I'm pretty sure it is the longest pit lane in iRacing. It goes on forever through there. It not only has you go by 60 stalls, but you have to go past an opening in the stalls around the hairpin and down the hill. So it's a long time to be stuck on the pit limiter, as it looks like the warm-up session is now wrapping up. Drivers will get ready to take part. The other interesting factor to note here today is you might have noticed the sun's getting low in the sky. It's going to be starting at 8 p.m. virtual standard time, which means we'll definitely be into the dark by the time we get to the finish of this race. All right, we got the cars gridding up. That means it's time to go through our starting order for today's race. And we've got Daniel Holmer starting on that top position for this 2 hour event. Starting from the pole could be useful, but we'll see if the fuel situation may make that less than desirable. Oscar Fredrickson will be starting in second, with Eric Smith in the third spot. You've got Daniel Thomas in P4, and then Ed Shelley starts in fifth. Tommy Alto will start sixth today, followed by David Baker in the seventh position. Outside of row 4 is Jesper Eriksson. Then it's Ryan Walker, excellent qualifying there in ninth, and Stephen Verveyen will round out your top 10.
Over the page then to 11th, where Alex Smith finds himself fastened out with Garen Batten in 12th. Your championship leader, Trevor Vrosky, I don't know how lucky this is going to be. He's going to go from 13th today on the grid, with Andrew Schism alongside him on the 7th row. It's then Tom Guest and Claude Belval, who are 15th and 16th positions, with Jeff Schmeier in 17th and Bart Mattia in 18th position. It's then Hawkenschott, who is in 19th. And rounding out your top 20 is Giorgio Raimondi.
Gary Thomas starts 21st. From there, it's Ray Partridge in 22nd, Josh Hampton in 23rd, and Anders Utvik in 24th. Quarter century mark goes to Sebastian Jackson, and then Adam Preston starts to his outside. Troy Anderson is next in 27th. You got Brian Scrivener in 28th, Wayne Hutchison in 29th, and Joran Bonds will be in 30th. Just a few more, Jake.
Yeah, and there's 8 more. There's 7 different manufacturers out there. Roberto De Filippis is at 31st with Andy Chell. There's then Michael Hogg and Tom Dreiling on row 17. Scott Kukas will have Cameron Brown for company. The number 1 of Bruno Rebello will go from 37th. And it is the aptly named Lorenzo Lomusico who will round out this 38-car field. We'll see whether his charge through the field will be music to his ears.
We were talking about the different makes of cars. It does look like, in terms of pace on qualifying, Ferrari and McLaren, they hold the top 8 positions. And then you finally get a Mercedes with Ryan Walker. So will we expect to see that same in the race? Or will drivers find a little bit more race pace out of their cars? Will some be kinder to their tires, maybe a bit better on fuel? Remember, it has to be about the big picture when it gets to race time, not just that one lap speed, as the Porsche pace car is going to let them go. But it's a long ways before we get racing, because in the endurance layout, they do not start here on the Grand Prix course, although Holmer's already going. I guess he didn't quite get the memo. They're supposed to go on the green from what we were told, and it looks like they're trying to already get racing as they come up towards La Source Hairpin. This is where the green was supposed to be flown, coming down the hill to the endurance start-finish line. Now we get the official green flag, but they are already spread out, Jake.
I think that's a call by Daniel Holmer to try and get an absolutely fantastic launch out there. Oh, no, he's gone! He's gone straight away into the barriers. Daniel Holmer has had a massive incident. He's come back across the circuit and bang! He gets spun around again.
Oh, more cars unable to avoid. This is becoming a disaster for the start of this one. There's at least a half dozen cars that have gotten serious damage. They do have that spare car, but now they are going to be under the gun.
Well, they'll look around and they'll say just how much is it going to hurt the likes of Joshua Hampton and Gary Thomas still in trouble. Lorenzo Lomusico's tried to get through it, but that has taken out a large majority of this field in the opening lap of this race. And this is what you get when you jump the gun early. You've got to try and run away and keep yourself out of trouble early, as we see a little look down the inside. A nice pass on Eric Smith there from Edward Shelley, who makes the pass. But you've got to keep out of trouble. If you go early, you can't afford to get any dramas at all. And with those cold tyres on the opening lap, that's what we see from Daniel Holmer, and it creates a massive chain reaction up the top of the hill because you are blind by the time you reach the top of Radion.
Real shame. Didn't want to see that many drivers taken out of contention this early on. It does say car 21 under review for one of the... We got problems out of Stavolo here, and David Baker going to pick up an easy spot.
Yeah, it was Tommy Alto who found himself sliding through the middle of the corner, losing out all of the trouble, and then Jesper Eriksson, who was trying to keep himself out of trouble in the Ferrari, had to get right onto the binders to avoid dramas and then managed to keep himself going. Oscar Fredriksson leads your race right now. It's then Daniel Thomas in second, and Eric Smith has found his way back through on Edward Shelley. That will put him now up into third position. And speaking of movers on the first lap, Vavroski, your championship leader, +7 on the opening lap, and he has to bail out of it because Jesper Eriksson, his main challenger for the championship at this early juncture of the season, looks to send one at La Source, but back up the hill they go, and I don't think Trevor's going to lift off. Jesper Eriksson does.
Oof, yeah, I was going to say, you don't want to be going too wide through Eau Rouge this early in the race. One of the less common Acuras for Trevor Vavroski out there, up into that 6th position. Also, wow, we have a ton of cars under review now that I'm looking at race control. Car 7 was added, car 5, car 79. 21 was Bart Mattia. I'll have to check on the others. Gary Thomas in the 7. and the 5, Andy Chell. Looks like the 79 is Daniel Holmer. So wonder if that is related to the early start and if we'll see some penalties. Pretty much all those cars are down in pit lane, Jake, so it's almost a bit of a moot point.
Well, they've got to take the tow time first and foremost to get themselves back and around. Then they get the fast repair, and then they are allowed back out onto circuit to go and make their attack known. So I think that in the early goings, it's moot in the sense of it's moot on lap 2. But by the time that they get rolling and back out in this race again, I think it's very clear what you'll find out of this, and that will be that penalties will be flowing through as they go. This is Ray Partridge's view. Oh, has to get away of one, has to get away of the other, and just runs out of time. There's a reason why drivers are very careful, and when you've got a yellow flag, drivers do think here on iRacing that they can just drive through it. You can't up the top of the hill there. I think Adam Preston was on the radio saying check up, check up, check up for the track starting to block itself again. But drivers have to be acutely aware of that, and if they're not, they're just asking for their race to be in trouble. That's why you've got to slow down by the time you reach the top of the hill. There's a reason why we have yellow flags here in iRacing.
Exactly. And, whoa, that's way wide for Vavrovsky. He's going to give that one up to Ericsson coming down into the braking of the bus stop chicane. Garen Batten now on his rear bumper, trying to see if he can demote him one more out onto the main straight once again to click off another last. In the meantime, Daniel Thomas sets the fastest lap of the race. He sits in second, about 3/4 of a second off the lead.
He does, and those 3/4 of a second here from Daniel Thomas is just keeping Oscar Fredriksson honest as Bruno Rebello now puts himself into a position here. P21 he now finds himself in. Looking at Cameron Brown, that would be for P20 out there, and the likes of Ryan Walker, who's really fallen down the field from 9th down to 23rd. We'll try and go around the outside of the on-camber corner here at the opening corner of La Source. Still can't quite get it over Roberto De Filippis, but he's trying to get that drive off of the exit here, and that's where it gets difficult because that McLaren of De Filippis is not going to lift off and go. So the Mercedes of Ryan Walker crests the rise and now has to use the entirety of the long climb up the Kemmel to make this move happen.
I wonder if Walker was one of those that had to slow down to avoid getting caught up in the accident at the start. That's a lot of places to lose, and it doesn't look like there's damage on the car. Remember, he was the highest non-Ferrari, non-McLaren car out there in that Mercedes. Clearly it's quick because he is just climbing over the back of De Filippis, and he might be through here as he's got a run coming down into Rivage. He'll take the apex away, and there's the job done.
Yeah, lovely done at Bruchel corner, and Ryan Walker comfortably takes that pass and then also that place. So he will now look to try and climb one at a time. The good news that you've got is that they've got 2 hours to try and gather it back as Jeroen Bonds loses out to Cameron Brown as he finds himself a way through, and that puts him up into 18th position. Then with that pass. So that is an easily constructed move and one that certainly helps as this continues on. But back over towards the front, and Vavrovsky there for composite performance. That Acura looked very squarely going through Blanchemont on that last lap, but looks a lot better this time trying to travel on through. It's the McLaren of David H. Baker who is there in front, who knows how to pick up a few good point hauls here and there, and he's certainly qualified the car well and is looking to try and improve. Daniel Thomas with the fastest lap of the race on a 2:19 flat.
Continuing to improve out there, so watch out for the 60 car. Clearly quick at this stage of the race. What's interesting to me is it was Ericsson in front of Vavrovsky before, and now it's David Baker. So Ericsson's kind of running away, although it looks like David might find himself demoted one here. As look at how close he is to that number 33. The Acura going to have to withstand the dirty air up and through Eau Rouge. You can see how tricky it is to hit your marks, and yeah, he loses time over the crest.
Lecombe comes up next, and Malmedy corner as Ryan Walker makes another one and goes up into 20th position, top right of your screen. But you're looking at that toe and trying to get that moving. I think David H. Baker was very, very lax on the brakes, allowed that pass to be made by Vavrovsky, doesn't want to sit down, and I do wonder whether this is an early call from David Baker just to say that I'm trying to stay in the slipstream and play a fuel game to get over to the line. Garen Batten and Tom Guest sit on the back too. So I think there's definitely lots of places where that can happen. Rebello also having a little look there as that move tries to be concocted in through Lake Coombe and out of Malmedy Corner. And the updates that they've done around this circuit, it used to be grass and a bit of runoff around here. It's now become a gravel paradise pretty much around the majority of sections of this track, mainly because of Formula drivers saying there's no challenge anymore around this circuit. Well, watch out when iRacing gets itself its track refresh that comes in, and all that gravel gets brought up onto circuit, like the driving there we saw from Ryan Walker going through that corner.
Exactly. And down to the inside, Rebello manages to sneak one into Puhan. Not often that you'll see drivers manage that. That'll open the door for Walker. He'll come up the outside down into Fanyes. Can he finish the job is the question. It's a right-left flick, and no, he can't quite keep it side by side through there. By the way, we got information that Walker started from pit lane, hence all the positions lost, which honestly may have been a boon, because I would assume he was able to avoid a lot of the chaos that happened at the top of the hill.
Well, the issue he would have had is that when he exited the pits, everyone was pretty much having an incident on the pit exit itself. So that would have been the only cause of concern with the way that he was going about his business. So I think he managed to stave himself out of trouble. And again, they're making the pass going through towards Blanchimont. Wayne Hutchinson this time. No real worries about that in terms of a move. So it looks like they're going to be all in a very nice position now. The chance for them to settle down into a rhythm in this race now brings itself forward. So they're having that opportunity to really get themselves a little bit of an opportunity now as Oscar Fredriksson continues his race lead with Daniel Thomas. But they are hitting a little bit of lap traffic, and you've got the Kitty Cat car in front of them of Scott Kukas that they've got to try and get around now.
Definitely stuck out in terms of the liveries out there. This is Daniel Thomas still chasing on Oscar Fredriksson. By the way, we did get our first penalty handed out. Car 8, 10-second post-race penalty. That would be Ray Partridge. Doesn't say what it was for, but I have to imagine probably involved in the lap 1 incident up and over Eau Rouge, because it does say it was for something on lap 1. In the meantime, Daniel Thomas, who has been looking so quick, has stayed within about 0.4 of a second. But, Jake, you brought it up earlier. If you're Thomas, how much do you actually want to pass Fredriksson, and how much do you want to just kind of hover back here behind him?
I'd say hover. I'd much prefer it if I was a driver, if I was just going to sit down and hover and know that if I can manage the same amount of fuel burn that Oscar Fredriksson is, that's going to be important. I think that's going to be Scott Kukas in the wall there going through Fanya, and it very much was just trying to stay out of trouble, stayed on the left and just carried way too much speed. I think tried to hold the momentum going through the middle of the corner, but ultimately the car just did not want to turn.
Ericsson hunting Shelley currently for that 4th spot, and you can even see a podium position up there with Eric Smith directly ahead as well. In fact, I wonder if Shelley might have a shot with how close he is. He gives a look down the inside, but not able to do anything quite yet. We had a second penalty given out for, well, 2 of them actually. Car 46, 5-second post-race penalty. That would be Muccio, I believe. And then we've got car 79. No further action, so that's Daniel Holmer.
That's interesting there with Daniel Holmer, because he got involved in an absolutely massive accident up at the top of the hill, who was the catalyst for everything. So the fact that he's got away with no further action, I'm not quite sure what part was protested, but it definitely has made a factor of this race. Ericsson up the hill looking at Edward Shelley, and well, actually he's trying to get past Ed and Eric right now, and Jesper Ericsson right now is hoping that he can get his way through, and they fan, look at the way they fan, 3 wide coming up towards Lake Coombe, which now becomes very aggressive on the inside of the first part of the chicane. So you can't really be too aggro through that section, and you can't really attack off the exit anymore because that gravel is just enough to spit the car out. Round the outside of Bruchel corner comes the next attempt, but they're all in line, but it is pretty much a case of they're lining up for an opportunity and don't think anybody wants to really lose out. But again, Eric Smith, a very shallow line through the speaker's corner, and that brings Edward Shelley into play to again have a look over to the double gauche, and again not quite find it.
He seems a bit stuck right now. The car looks fast, but Ed Shelley can do nothing with it, all while having to deal with Jesper Ericsson breathing down his neck. I'm kind of curious what happened in qualifying. because I thought it weird that Jesper was as far down as he is. Usually he's a top 5 qualifying driver, only starting from 8th here today. And yet in the race, look at how quick that Ferrari is. He's been making passes since pretty much the start of this race.
2:19.2 on his last lap, an 18.8 from Fredriksson, and a 19 flat from Daniel Thomas. So I think maybe this is a case of all of the SimRace Sweden esports drivers finding themselves saying, right, we're all going to choose the Ferrari, and it might just be that Jesper Eriksson is not as accomplished in a Ferrari as his two teammates is, but oh yes, he has to try and throw that down the inside. He didn't really have a choice. He sort of outbroke himself into an overtake, which sometimes you have to do. Now he'll get the drive off of the exit to go and attack over towards La Source once again. Will there be fight from Edward Shelley? You bet there will be, but ultimately has to roll off the brakes a little earlier, and Jesper Eriksson gets his pass, and that puts him up into P4.
Nicely done by Eriksson. They lost little ground on Smith with that one, but I think that was the right move at the right time. He's clearly got the pace to go and chase him down, or will he have it all his own way? Because look at how quick Shelley is coming up and over Eau Rouge. Oh, he's right behind him, but maybe his momentum was blunted because he definitely lifted coming down here. He's still going to show himself out to the racing line. They'll go by some lap traffic. They'll stay in order, and Shelley maybe trying to ride those coattails a bit.
Yeah, that lap traffic was Joshua Hampton to try and get around, and Andrew Schism here. This against Jeff Schmeier puts him into the top 10. So a very good pass on Schmeier, who looks behind at Tommy Alto, who found himself spun around going through at the Stavolo corner on circuit on the opening lap. So from the Academy team of SimRace Sweden esports. So it's not just the fact here, Joe, that SimRace Sweden esports are quick. It's the fact that they're cultivating the next generation of talent as well.
Very much so. Schism trying to make sure he gets a nice wide gap over Schmeier after that pass coming down the Kemmel straight, and behind them, Alto giving watch, trying to see if he can get involved in this as well. Often, Jake, we've seen that drivers just need to try and bide their time until an opportunity presents itself.
You've got to split up the races into chunks, into manageable chunks, to say, how are you going to attack? You look at the first half an hour of the race and you just want to get yourself settled into it. The middle hour of the race is your meat and potatoes. It's the one where you've got to just put the laps in to buy your ticket towards the end. And at the end of the race, that's when you can go all out and try and gain that extra place you want, wherever it may be. Now, let's take a little look here at Cameron Brown, who had an issue in the Fusion Gold Eurocar. That indicates to me a failure of some kind.
It does look like it. It's weird that you would outbrake it that badly. And at least he only kind of rubbed up against the barrier. I don't think that was too much damage, but there was a lot of lost time in that one. Good switch back here from Tommy. Can he make use of it coming down into the La Source hairpin is the question. Defensive move to the inside from Jeff Schmeier, but you can get the over-under here if you time it right. It's not going to be an over-under. It's going to be round the outside, and Tommy finding the grip. That was a brilliant move.
Tommy Alto, realizing that he's got a lot of rotation at the moment in his Ferrari, makes light work there of what goes on for Jeff Schmeier, who held the inside quite nicely in the McLaren, but just, I think, was a little bit too committed down to the inside, couldn't get the drive, and all of a sudden there's troubles. And speaking of which, there are drivers trying to make moves. Yes, but Eriksson is just hounding the back of Eric Smith for that third place position, hoping that this one's going to be down the hill at Bruxelles. Not going to happen. Trying to beat the second place Ferrari in this field, not going to work right now. But you are looking at a Jesper Eriksson that just wants some clean air and just wants to gallop and roam across the Belgian Ardennes, but is not getting any love for it thanks to Eric Smith.
I mean, he's on a mission. I'm impressed with how quickly he has caught up to that 5.56 and hasn't been able to make the pass yet, but clearly, again, the car is fast today for the 37 driver. Just needs to try and find the right place to make that stick. As the sun gets ever lower in the sky, going to be pretty soon that we get it actually past the horizon. That was into the gravel for Jesper that time coming out of Fanyee.
Yeah, you got to be careful through there. It's a 90-degree right into a 90-degree left, which is a medium speed corner as you go through. But if you don't get the right transfer through the first part and you don't turn in quick enough for the second part, you can very easily find yourself shuffled out into that gravel on the outside. It is a very scary prospect when you go through and you get that incorrect. But these drivers know how important those corners are. They're the only two corners that have that sort of characteristic to it. And into the final chicane once again. Third, fourth and fifth continue to hold their line. Vavroski will also be looking back there a little bit behind him because he's still being held by Garen Batten here in 7th position. A gain of 5 so far from his race. So I think he's doing a good job right now just to keep himself in play. But Ericsson, he'll get another opportunity. That's the good thing about having a 2-hour race, is that if you don't get it on a certain lap, like lap 8, there's always lap 9.
Indeed. We've got so much time left. We're only 20 minutes into this race. This is a good run once again from Jesper. He's got the momentum. He's also got the slipstream. So how is Eric going to take this? He holds to the right-hand side, clearly intent on defending, not allowing him the inside run down to the braking of Lecombe. It's still going to cost him, though. He's a little too shallow. Look at that. Scything his way through, looking like he is in a different class of car. Ericsson onto the podium.
That's just insane. You cover the inside the entire way around, and the ultimate problem there is that it was so defensive into the corner that the speed couldn't be maintained by Eric Smith, and I think he learnt one there off of what Jesper Ericsson was able to achieve, and that just goes to show you how much confidence Jesper Ericsson has. I don't know many drivers who would go from about a car length back to try and throw it around the outside of Lecombe, but obviously Jesper Ericsson's one of them, and that's why he's making progress and he's so high up in the championship. It now puts Ed Shelley in a position where he can attack Eric Smith once again and look for that 4th place. But crucially for Jesper Ericsson is a chance for him to stretch his legs and try and get back to the leading duo of Daniel Thomas and Oscar Fredriksson.
Been looking to try and connect with his teammate, no doubt. 7 seconds up the road. Might be a little difficult, but not impossible to gain that. And now that he's in clear air, we'll get a much better picture if he is faster. In the meantime, this leaves Smith and Shelley to fight amongst each other.
It does. And now it gives them the time just to focus on themselves for about 5-10 minutes and say this is where they want to be looking. But this is a track that often is very formulaic, is very popular in terms of what everybody wants to try and achieve. As Ryan Walker a little bit further back in the field looks to now try and gain Ps 16 and 15 out there over Bruno Rebello and Troy Anderson, who is out there looking for the passes along this small flick left, which is the curb of Paul Frere, named after the Formula One driver of the 70s who found great results without ever finding a race win overall. But then through the corner and now out of Blanchimont in towards that final chicane, and this is a chicane which is devilishly difficult with the details because it's a double off camber right into left, so you do have to hug the curb or hope that you can take that outside line a little bit more and get that run. But speaking of struggling, Troy Anderson, I think, has been a little bit too aggressive through that corner, so he's just lifted off, allowed those two in front to go on by because he doesn't want anything to do with that. He's just trying to prioritise the finish in the UDOX Daisy 22.
Walker getting ever closer to where he would have started this race. What's happened to Brian Scrivener?
Oh,
Car getting, the curb. Keep it off the barriers, keep it off the barriers. He's almost got it. No, he doesn't. And he takes a little bit of damage, but he should be able to carry on from that. But that has got to be frustrating.
It's incredibly frustrating for Brian Scrivener because you go through at the double gauche corner, that long left-hander, and you are reliant on throwing the car in and just holding on the throttle to try and get that car to work, and you don't quite know how much throttle you need to make sure that the car works without the tail kicking out. And the way that his car was starting to go around the curb and the way he hit it just kicked the back wheels up into the air, and from that point it's try and hold on out there on track, and he just couldn't find it. The rodeo ended with him in the barriers.
Sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So as the drivers keep pushing on, we're still well away from what we expect any pit stops to be. And we've been alluding to this, Jake, but the reason that we keep talking so much about, fuel saving and whatnot we're expecting it to be extremely tight to do a one-stopper on this one. And with the pit lane being so long, I have to imagine most drivers probably going to be pushing for that one stop.
Well, it's a 2-hour race, so it makes it very simple. If you can go 1 hour in this race, you're all right. You can go an hour, and then it means that by the time you get yourself around and do that final stint, you've got another hour to play with. I would even argue that if you can go an hour, just 59 minutes before jumping into the pits, you've got an opportunity, because the pit lane transit is so long that you've got that real chance to say, I can make this happen, as we watch Ryan Walker again looking to make a pass, but it looks like Bruno Rebello's got enough of a gap to run away. But the fuel game is about what do you lose if you dive down into the pits. And if you've got to splash and dash and put legitimately a litre of fuel in to make sure you can confirm a finish around this circuit, you're wasting a minute's worth of lane transit time to get 1 litre of fuel. And I think everybody turns around and goes, that is not a price you want to be paying.
That's looking at half a lap lost right there with that extra transit. So yeah, you'd need to make up a massive gap to make it work. Walker sizing up Bruno, coming up and over the top of the hill once again. And he's got a really good run now once he gets up to the Kemmel straight. Bruno just up ahead, running the McLaren up against the Mercedes and coming under braking. I thought for sure that Ryan would have had a shot there.
No, I think he was still a little bit too far away, and I think Ryan's a very clever driver in the way that he goes about his business. If he doesn't want to make a move, he lifts out of it, tries to get a bit of fuel saving done, and goes for it again. And again, he's just early off the throttle. It's a lot more stabby, I think you can see by the lights just lifting up there in the McLaren of Bruno Rebello. It's very erratic the way he goes around the corner looking for that grip. Ryan senses that, uses that experience to go to the inside here, almost hugs him going in towards Double Gauche, and then Bruno Rebello says, no, I'm going to fight you back on the outside. I'm going to try and pinch and pinch and pinch, and they managed to fight their way off the corner, but now you're going to have to go the long way around Fania, and again, that experience comes into play from Ryan Walker. He just lifts out of it, doesn't want any trouble with it, and he'll try and win this back another day. He gets a fantastic drive coming through the penultimate section, and once more can't get any more look as he goes through. I think he's going to have to try and unlock this through Stavolo.
Rebello doesn't care that it's not St. Paddy's Day yet. You're right, he pinched really hard down there, but I mean, he gave him just enough of a car's width and they didn't make contact. So great racing from the pair of them. Now coming up to the corner at Blanchimont, it looks like just too difficult to try and hold on to the back of that car with the dirty air. Even though these are tin tops and not Formula One cars, you'll still get a big washout.
You will, and Blanchimont is that sort of corner where it separates the wheat from the chaff. You have to really have commitment on your right foot and just pray that not lifting is going to be the right decision. So I think it really showed how difficult sometimes it can be to go and make these moves out on track if you are starting to find that wash, and especially when you've got a slightly higher cab position, so to speak, that you've got from the likes there of Ryan Walker. It does mean that you do buff it a little bit more, that the dirty air does become a little bit more troublesome out on circuit for you. But that's a mistake going through at the speaker's corner, and Edward Shelley picks it up over Eric Smith, and that's what you've got to be very careful about. It's one of the newly laid pieces of gravel down there to stop the immediate track extending, and I think it's a fantastic thing, especially for the iRacing events. There's no instant limit here, but once upon a time they would go so aggressive. Spa would have been known for a circuit where, you know, track limits would not be enforced. Every driver would go out there in the top splits and find themselves using all of the track limits to try and win, as we take a look at Tom Guess. And it would be quite funny to see one of the most stacked, I would say, Skip Barber races that will come along next week, to see drivers going from pro license down to D license.
That's right. Yeah, Guest with a big hit, though, unfortunately, down at No Name and right into the wall. So he'll probably have to come in for that spare car, get back out and have to take an extra pit stop. Daniel Thomas, in the meantime, getting as close as a quarter of a second up to Oscar Fredriksson. Still not quite past him, and they're still about 6.5 seconds ahead of Oscar's fellow Swede Jesper down the road. So They haven't changed dramatically, but it does appear that a bit of pressure is being put on at times by Thomas.
I'd say it's sustained pressure at the moment. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about in the early stages of this race, as finally Ryan Walker will try the long road, hard travelled. But again, Rebello is just confident through the high-speed corners and able to place the car in a really annoying position here for Ryan Walker, who's clearly faster and he's got a couple seconds in the back pocket. But I think Daniel Thomas doesn't want to try and win this race in the opening half an hour to the opening hour. I think he'll try and reevaluate where he is in the pit stops, and if he's managed to save behind Fredriksson, then he's just using him as a way to cut through the air and save fuel and get that real opportunity to manage the drive. Walker taking a wider entry into the corner, trying to really get this slingshot off the exit, because if you can get a great Eau Rouge and Radio on this widened Eau Rouge and Radio now, they actually knocked down the house that's up there on the left-hand side. The one on the right has still been there for over 100 years and has survived 2 world wars. But there on the exit of the corner, now Ryan Walker can get the drive that he wants in the Mercedes. 257 kilometers an hour against Bruno Rebello, and now he gets inside. And again, he's just not as confident on the brakes.
This is starting to look to me like he is trying to think big picture here, that he is just going to maybe use this to save a little fuel. Because let's talk for a moment about Bruno Rebello. I don't think we've touched on this. He's up 22 positions. For all the hard work that Ryan Walker has done, Rebello qualified there and has gained that many. He is looking very, very fast. So here we go. This is where we saw a try before down the inside and it didn't work. Doesn't do it again. Remembering maybe what happened last time, Walker sits and stays behind. How long is he willing to rest behind the number 1 car?
Not very long is my understanding of it, but he doesn't have a choice at the moment, Joe, because of the way that Bruno Rebello is driving fantastically in his defence. So I don't think there's much you can argue with at the moment. A little kick up of the gravel comes out then of that section of road. They go through the campus corner with the campus of technology down on the inside there as they go through at that section of track. And now on this long road back to home, now it's the inside that benefits and favours the likes of Ryan Walker. This is where he wants to try and take it away. But again, just use that run around the outside. That's just as easy as you like from Bruno Rebello. He does not care at the moment where Ryan places his car. Inside, outside, up, down, left, right, slant ways. You can use the great glass elevator to try and make that move, and it still wouldn't work.
Probably some choice Scottish swear words coming out of that cockpit after being denied multiple times now from what looked like a good pass about to be done. Oscar Fredriksson, in the meantime, I mentioned at times Thomas gets within a quarter of a second. This is one of those moments right up on top of him. Love the FAF livery here on the McLaren chasing the Ferrari. It is still Ferrari, McLaren, Ferrari, McLaren, Ferrari for your top 5. Still the car to beat today.
Well, between the likes of the Ferrari and the McLaren, both of them have a very similar profile in terms of how they stand in the GT3 field. Both are very much about trying to sit down and be as balanced and as dynamic as possible. It's very different to, say, the Porsche out there. It's very different to the Ford. It is one of those cars that just has that ability to just be the jack of all trades and the master of none. And I think that ability to go through each and every part of a circuit that challenges each and every part of a driver is what is the benefit for the long term, and that's what they're trying to garner and understand as they go through. Now, look how close you can get here from Daniel Thomas. He gets right up underneath, but again, is a lot earlier on the brakes, trying to roll into the corner, trying to save that fuel, and to then go and say, you know what? I could have made that move. I could have made a lunge, but I'm not going to, because I'm just going to watch what you do, Oscar, as a driver. And I don't think they actually have that much worry, because Daniel Thomas just set a 18.6 on that last lap, which is the fastest lap of the race.
He's done that a few times now. His just looked mighty, mighty quick. So this could be bad news if Fredriksson does see him manage to get by, because he could start to run away from it. Let's see what it looks like over the top of Radion as they crest the hill. Oh, wow, another big run here from the plaid machine, and he's got a nice little toe coming down the middle of the track, back to the racing line, leaves the door open. Oscar Fredrickson could regret that later. This time, Thomas is through for sure.
It's a lovely pass, but one that also had a bit of Oscar Fredrickson lifting out as he went up over to the top of the crest, then going towards Lake Coombe. I think that's very telling from Oscar Fredrickson that, 33 minutes into this race, he can't get the race lead back. He's just going to sit behind the McLaren now and do exactly what Daniel Thomas did in the first part of the stint. So I'm not sure how wise that move is, but for Oscar Fredrickson, he now gets a chance to study here what Daniel Thomas is capable of, where he's strong in the corners, where he's weak in the corners, and ultimately, when it comes down to the final 15, 20 minutes, he then has an opportunity to look and say, this is where I want to attack and how I want to attack.
It is 8:51 virtual standard time out here at Spa right now. So that means we have 1 hour exactly of daylight left, at least in terms of when sunset officially will happen. The hills around here will block a lot of that sunlight, so it'll get dark in a few places earlier than others, and drivers will be having to rely on those headlights as it does get quite dark out here. Now, did Walker finally get through, or did something happen in this fight? Again, things getting feisty coming down into Puan, and it got a little too feisty. Contact between them. Elbows were out, and Walker gets the spot.
I can't really blame Ryan Walker in that position. He worked himself to side by side. He had the right to the corner as he went through, so he had no real position to go and sit down and say, I'm not going to budge at that point. So that's up to Rebello to try and find the pass, and if he couldn't find it cleanly and the contact's made, the contact is 100% on him and how he goes. Now, keep an eye on this recovery going on from Dan Holmer here, who's now looking for 28th position. He gets past Giorgio Raimondi for that, and he's been quietly putting in the laps because he's a minute 56 off of the lead and trying to keep himself out of every form of trouble here and see how many places he can gain. I reckon that in the next, I would say, hour or so, he would be looking at trying to target a top 20, and I do believe that a top 15 might be on the horizon if he can keep his pace up.
And it makes you think, with him starting on the pole, we could have had three members of that Swedish team within the top 5 right now, as currently it's a 2-3 for them with Oscar and Jesper second and third. But Daniel's doing a good job of trying to get back in the hunt on this one. He's just made quite a bit of hard work for himself at this stage. And credit to Oscar, he's not dropping away. So yeah, I think you're right that was an intentional move to slot in behind, save a little bit of fuel because he knew he could keep pace with the 60.
It's a long race, and with looking around at what it's currently predicting right now, it's currently predicting to be a 52-lap race out there here today. So there's not really much that they can do about keeping themselves in trouble. That's deep, and that's something that I wasn't expecting to see there actually down at turn 1, which was a little bit of debris which was down there. It looked like a rear wing had come off of someone. I think it's Roberto Di Filippis potentially, who would have been that driver who had a little bit of that contact, but I'm not quite sure what went on there. But ultimately, up the hill, Michael Hogg in the Baby Metal #NotAcult Racing team, now looking to try and keep himself with that move after falling to the back of the group. The Porsche very heavy in the defense. That's Andy Chell, who is there trying to keep himself through, and they're behind Lorenzo Lamusico here in the Ferrari, who is just doing everything possible. And I do have to love the little throw over to number 46 in the yellow and the black, as it's now going to be Fredrickson with the fastest lap of the race.
There's not too many Porsches out here competing. There's that one for Chell, and then I think the only other one that we've got on the circuit is Sebastian Jackson. So not a car that seems to be much desired here at a track with a lot of fast corners. Meanwhile, Ryan Walker has quickly moved up to... No, he is not by. When did Rebello get back through?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? So Ryan Walker finds out firsthand that He's not going to have everything his own way. Rebello is just as much as equal out there on track, and I think that's gone up the hill in towards, actually it's gone a long way back. He's lost that move, so I think that it's taking him a lap and a bit here in terms of gaining that place and then immediately losing it back again. So Ryan Walker now back behind Bruno Rebello and having to do all that work again. What I was going to do was just talk about drivers who maybe are in a little bit of a less loved car. I think there's only one Chevrolet out there racing here today, and that's Tom Dreiling in the number 82 Immortal car, looking all stars and stripes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. I do love the way the Corvette GT3 looks. I was able to track it down. It looks like a slowdown penalty over Radeon, and that is what gave up the position for Walker. As we come back to the battle for the 23rd spot, Muccio ahead of Chell, ahead of Hogg, and coming up to Eau Rouge once again, all trying to set themselves up. Love the way the sun just glints off the surface here late in the evening, and it's a pretty good exit by Michael Hogg, picking up the speed, 160 miles an hour already halfway down the straight.
We do have a car in the pits, and it is Roberto De Filippis, so he is going to be the first driver in to make a pit stop, and I wonder whether that is for the damage to the rear of his car, which I think has gone.
Sorry. On screen, we had an accident just there. Hogg and Lemusio coming together, and I know Chell managed to sneak through. I don't know if Chell was involved in starting that one, but I saw a car sideways, and I think they'll both get away with it, Jake. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, it was a case of Andy Chell down to the inside, so he flew through, and Lemusico, I think, was just trying to shut the door and take a natural line off the exit. The issue he runs into is Michael Hogg is there just as he tries to shut the door. So ultimately, I think that's a case of a car being a little bit slower and finding itself in a bit of trouble, but both of them are actually going to lose the place there. That's Cameron Brown making an absolute, I would say, easy job of that pass there going through on Michael Hogg. It just showed the complete difference of downforce and understeer going through at double gauche, and Michael Hogg just does not have the same level of commitment through the corner that Cameron Brown does, and he has a massive moment, does Michael, as he goes through, and this is what you find when you struggle a little bit in GT cars. The only way you're going to get quicker and the only way you're going to get more rear downforce is if you put more speed through the car, which means that the spoiler throws the rear tyres down onto the road more.
They require some great commitment. You compare speeds of when the GT3 class first came out at this stage many years ago, and compare them to now. They're so fast. They have so much downforce, and there's a reason it's highly favored by a lot of drivers the world over. Ryan Walker really liking the class, but not liking his battle with Rebello right now. He lost that position with a slowdown penalty. Going to have to fight his way back through, looking for the long way through Rivage. No dice.
Well, it's not a case of Rebello without a cause. He's got a cause, and that cause is I'm going to make sure that Ryan Walker doesn't get by. These two, of course, effectively plus 22, and they're not a million miles away either with the way that they're pushing each other right now from Adam Preston. They gained 0.3 of a second on him on that last lap. So Adam Preston in car number 99, I say, would have two very big problems in the rear view mirror there in his Fusion car. But for Bruno Rebello right now, he's trying to throw what he can, and Eric Smith off the road, and is that Vavrovsky who's joined him?
It is indeed. He's having to go a long ways to turn around. He's got to be careful he does not get a black flag and get DQ'd. You go farther back enough, and the sim will expel you, but he carries on. He does not come.
Was Smith trying to pit? I think Smith was just trying to pit, so that would have been his strategy, to come in, make a stop, and Vavrovsky, who was diving down the inside there, just completely didn't see it and was trying to just take his line, and effectively both of them were just tripping over each other to try and enter the pit lane, and Vavrovsky will feel like he's got every right to go and take a penalty on that, because he was slow in the middle of the road, not really over to the right-hand side trying to pit. So for Vavrovsky, the championship leader, not one that he's happy about. He's now down to 8th in his Acura behind Tommy Alto.
Oh, man, sometimes it's difficult to think of everything in racing because so much can happen out there. There's so many moving parts and not one you expect, but it's not unheard of out here. Let's see. It sounds like lap 18, car 34 under review. Is that Vrosky?
That's Edward Shelley.
Oh, interesting. So not sure what happened there. Meanwhile, still watching Walker versus Rebello. They've been endless entertainment over the course of our first hour of the race. Coming up into the braking zone, though, we're not going to get a change of position this time. You are right. They have been reeling in Preston. It's down to a second and a half. Boy, this is going to be a real storm for that 99 car. Those two battling their way through if they can, keep the fight going as they go by him.
Well, if they want to make those moves and they want this race to go the way that they want to, they want to try and fly by Adam Preston quickly, and Preston will, of course, be acutely aware of what's been happening behind on how aggressive Ryan Walker's been pivoting, and he'll see that side-by-side as music to his ears as here comes the move into the corner, again trying to hold round the outside, and Walker pinched down low, but then has to try and fight back, almost nose-to-tail contact. Rebello has to open the steering and allow through Ryan Walker into that position. He gets on the headlights to say, I don't think that was very cool, but that's what you call a trick of the trade in GT. He just hung him out, and at the last point, it was just about that final push-off that you get, for example, in the Six Nations Rugby or in an NFL game to say, no, I'm going to walk and score my try-dash touchdown.
And that gives Walker 14th spot. If he can make some distance up the road and catch up to Preston, that can hopefully put him a buffer between he and him. As Cameron Brown, with barely enough space to sneak onto the racing line. That was supreme trust in Chell.
Yeah, needed all the trust there of Andy Chell to commit to that move, and that's what people don't seem to understand sometimes with moves out on track, that you are trying to keep yourself out of trouble. Speaking of which, Lorenzo Lamusico, I think, has had himself a very big incident coming out of Double Gauche. We'll take a look at Trevor Vrosky's moment, and we'll try and get Lamusico's issue later, but you can see that Eric Smith's trying to turn right into the pits here, and Trevor Vrosky's got no other real alternative out there. He's trying to take the corner at a natural racing speed. He can't sit down and just wait and go completely off the binders to allow Eric Smith to go into the pits. That's all on Eric Smith, in my view.
I agree. I was going to say that I feel like Smith overshot the corner, it looked like, if anything. So he was the one that was offline and needed to stay to that right-hand side. But that's for race control to decide if it's worth any sort of punishment. Of course, it has to be reported to them. And I haven't seen anything about that being investigated yet, so it might just carry on. And Walker,
I think that's what
here,
they were trying to investigate, but they called the wrong car number. So this is Lamusico, and this is what happened. Oh, it's that curb again.
Oh, massive hit, and somebody escaped big time. Almost think, I don't know if the car just naturally would have done that, but I feel like maybe holding the brakes a little harder could have been used there. By the way, Walker has lost the spot again. I don't know if it's for the same reason, but Rebello is by once more.
It's Groundhog Day right now for Ryan Walker, and I don't think there's much that he can say or do about it here. He's been trying his best to try and break away, and I didn't quite catch it because it was caught in my blind spot, but I would assume it was that same area of circuit that's caught him out a second time, and Ryan's got to be very alert to the fact that he's been dropping the car off at Orush and Radion as he's gone up the hill, and that Mercedes can sometimes be a little bit pernickety on the balance. So I think that's what we're starting to see here out of Ryan Walker, a driver who is maybe getting a little bit frustrated at seeing the very same luminous green that's there in front of him.
It was indeed the exact same thing up and over Radion. He got a slowdown penalty. For those not familiar with iRacing, what we're talking about with these slowdowns is if you cut the circuit, there's certain areas that's watched by iRacing, it will automatically tell you to give the time back.
Yeah, and Andy Chell making contact front to rear there for 23rd position out there. That is Jerome Bonds, who is there in the 189 car, Club Benelux. And for the moment, this is going to be about where you want to make that move. Pulls over Lamborghini versus Porsche as they now make that charge, and it's going to be the Porsche of Andy Chell that will find that pass and drive on by, and the I would say purple to green fade that is out there at the moment does the job quite nicely, and it's the Quantum's car that gets the pass done, and just like that, into the pits comes your own Bonds.
Interesting. Okay. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't make it to the finish. We don't know if they're completely out of fuel. We'll find out. Oh, and Bonds is a black flag. Was that for speeding? That must have been for speeding.
Entry.
Oh.
You got to be so careful with the white lines on entry and exit when it comes to racing, and we see it quite a bit at the Red Bull Ring, for example. Unsafe pit entry comes in, but iRacing have really cracked down on those sorts of scenarios out there, and especially around here, because you've got that massive layer of green runoff that goes through. It's not actually the pit entrance. You've got to go right over to the right-hand side. It stops that massive bottleneck that goes through on a one-track line to go through. Fredriksson had fallen at one point in the SimRacing Sweden eSports car to 1.1 seconds out there, but his fastest lap's coming back in again, and now he's got the gap back to half a second. More traffic in front. It's the recently left the pits, Eric Smith.
Starting to see a lot more debris and marbles off racing line as well as this race carries on. It's going to make it even harder to try and overtake in some spots, getting all the clag on your tires. As we get closer to the halfway mark of this race. Thomas leading, but now dealing with ever more lap traffic in front of him. Eric Smith, the car up the road, and surely they're going to have to try and overtake. The blue flags, of course, only informational in this series.
Yeah, so for those who come from a Formula background, for example, a blue flag is a mandatory flag out there in the world of racing, which means if you see that blue flag, you must, under all circumstances, pull over within a reasonable time frame, which is 3 marshal posts, in order to allow the car behind to overtake safely. In GT, it's definitely not the same out there. That blue flag is just a reminder for the driver in front to say that the driver behind is quicker than you and wants to put a lap on you, but it is the responsibility of the passing car to make that all happen and to effectively lap the car safely. And this is where Smith gets himself involved, because he's going to lunge down the inside of Troy Anderson, who's yet to pit, comfortably gets that move, and Anderson is going to be freight trained through at Stavelo corner. So Fredriksson and Thomas, your race leader, goes on by, but you now start to think about what that means as a way to look forward over the course of this race, and the blue flags are something that all of these sim racers should know, because in every single iRacing official road race out there, all blue flags are run to advisory, not mandatory.
Exactly. Down to only 26 cars on the lead lap at this stage. Granted, some of them have taken pit stops, so that might shift and change as the race carries on. But I'm curious how many will be able to finish on the lead lap. This is a very long lap, 2+ minutes just to circulate around Spa once in GT3 cars. So you wouldn't usually expect lap traffic to be as big of an issue, but it certainly has become one, I think, because of that early accident.
Yeah, it will be, and I think that drivers that fall out of line and pick up damage early, I think this would have been a much more congested field at the start of this race. Were it not for that, everybody had to check up and work out where they wanted to go. And speaking of where do you want to go, here comes the move for the race lead. Oscar Fredriksson to the inside. Elementary, my dear Watson. Daniel Thomas just allows that move to happen, doesn't have to deviate his line, and falls back into second position. I wonder if that is an indication of Oscar Fredriksson wanting to pit sometime soon, as he struggles with the exit of Malmedy corner, because the one thing that you want diving into the pits around this circuit of Spa is track position.
Absolutely, and it does kind of smack of, I've saved enough fuel, might as well pick it back up, and I'm good to go from here. And boy, is he good to go. Look at him already start to stretch away a little bit from Thomas. It's not as though the 60 is hanging on very easily, but he hasn't completely dropped off. We watch from the back of the Swede. You can see speeds of 200+ kilometers per hour, even through some of the short shoots here.
Yeah, and those small runs, of course, where the straights aren't long enough to go and make a pass, but you do get that important understanding of where your pace is and how you work through the mid to high gearings of your car. I really think that you do have to be alert into those corners because there's still heavy braking zones that come along. And here's Bart Mattia, who is looking to try and go the long way around, hoping that move was going to be made. No chance then for Giorgio Raimondi to make that pass. Mattia holds that station and does a very good job of keeping that Mustang into check. And a Mustang, of course, had the Jeremy Clarkson element to it back in the early to mid 2000s of it's scared of making a turn other than left out there on track. But this is a Mustang that does very well with that brute force power that it has coming out of that Ford engine, but also as it goes through, it's very good in terms of what it does. I think it's more of a power track car out there, and so that's why it can sometimes have a little bit of a boost when it comes to Spa.
Exactly. And I mean, let's be honest, it looks fantastic as well, but not as heavily represented, although we do have at least a couple of the Fords out there. One of the newer GT3 cars to show up here on iRacing as he weaves his way through the Lacombe chicane and then out of Malmedy, the highest part of the track where it's literally all downhill from here.
Yeah, you reach the top of the circuit here, and what is the newer part of the circuit by comparison to what they had, which was running the public roads for what was a 13-kilometre circuit that had the likes of the Master Kink, for example, to try and go through. Mattia with the Sebastian Vettel helmet there that he's running out there on track, running through double gauche. And this middle sector is designed in such a way that it's there to make you think. You got to think through these corners because it is all about having the downforce behind you to throw the car in. It's not as point and squirt as it is in the opening sector or the final sector. So that then becomes really important. No further action declared on the lap 18 incident. So I'm a little bit surprised to see that, but we'll continue on and say it's clean racing goes forward. But Mattia here is really good coming out of Stavolo, and Lorenzo Lamusico here, who is laps down in this race. By laps down, I mean one, is going to have to let him go here.
Yeah, the car's faster. You might as well just not race them hard and let them run their own race. They're a lap down. They're unlikely to catch you back up, even from that far back with an hour left to go. Coming up into the braking of that final chicane, Daniel Thomas now back into second. Worth noting as well, coming out of the chicane, while the start line is out of La Source hairpin, the finish line is right here, essentially.
Yeah, so when they've got to go around and do their final lap, they've only got to go to this section of circuit, which is the finish line here out on track, and not to the start line, which is all the way around the corner and is the traditional start line for endurance racing at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, around this section of road on the run up to Eau Rouge and Radion. The reason why they've got that staggered start in terms of their endurance run compared to a Formula start out there is because of the nature of putting so many cars on the circuit, that you get that bottleneck at the La Source hairpin and you could bring 30, 40, 50 cars into trouble. Didn't do much good for us though here today on the opening lap of the race, but in theory, in principle, it means that you get less accidents out there on track.
Yeah, that's in theory is always very different from seeing things in action, but that's just something that tends to happen from time to time in racing, that you get those opening stage accidents that cost a lot of cars. Usually in the real world, a lot of money. Thankfully, they don't have that problem here in the sim, but it still causes you some ire and some frustration after weeks of preparation, especially here in the majors for their races. Thomas keeping things honest for Fredriksson, staying right with him. And behind them, we were wondering about Jesper Eriksson. He is down to about 5 seconds, so he has overall gained time. It seems like it's by small margins, but if the trend continues, he might be there towards the end of the race.
It depends on when he pits as well, because I think it's going to be really critical for him that he tries to get at least a lap on these drivers so he can undercut and use the best of a brand new tyre to go out and attack the second half of this race. Jesper Eriksson is a driver who is fantastic in terms of speed, but he's going to need help here because he knows his teammate Oscar Fredriksson. They're kind of like A and A1 in terms of the way that they drive. They are, if it's not one of them, it's the other one that you've got to try and worry about. And speaking of worrying about, here's Trevor Vavrosky now as he looks to sit in 8th place, and he's going to try and worry the back of Tommy Alto. They've got Seb Jackson that they've got to try and get by in front in the Porsche, but for the moment, that Acura lines up the Academy SimRace Sweden Esports Ferrari for that place and is trying to pivot down to that inside. It's going to be covered, and I've never seen traffic scared off the road too much through Blanchemont, but there you see it. Sebastian Jackson taking an egregious line to try and avoid that trouble. Vavrosky still not close enough, heavily defended down on the brakes by Tommy Alto, and again, he almost got bitten twice, did Vavrosky. He learned.
Yeah, I could see a slow up there because he just hesitated thinking, what if this is the same thing? And it turned out to be the same thing. Interestingly, Alto did not get a penalty for unsafe pit entry, even though he cut across there. Are we going to see another change for position? Actually, well, wait.
Yes.
Wasn't Fred? Yes, so Thomas is back ahead. Interesting.
Yeah, he's done a wonderful job. I think that also indicates, Joe, that the penalty that we saw earlier on would have been for speeding.
Yeah. So it looks like you can get away with cutting across that little area. It's just making sure you get down the speed you need at the cones. And Rebello has finally pitted in, freeing Ryan Walker. And off he sets to try and make use of this clear air. There's Rebello in pit lane. You brought up Trevor Vavrosky as well. This is less than ideal because remember, yes, it's early stages in the championship, but Eriksson is the closest one that he's got to worry about. Right now in the championship, Dowd sits in second, but Nathan Dowd, I don't think he's even here today, is he?
No, I haven't seen Nathan Dowd out there at all, but he could be using his one round to say, I raced International, or I raced in Pacific, or one of those. So he could have just put his points all somewhere else. It's one of the good things about the major series is that it runs 3 different regions. It spans all across the world, and you've got that opportunity to say, well, for one round, I can choose. I don't want to race against my opponents. I want to race against a different level of opponent out there, whether it's a case of I can't make this time zone, or maybe I think the field's going to be easier if I race in this time zone compared to another. It does give a little bit of a strategy over towards it. Now, 10 seconds away from the hour, and that was perfectly timed by Oscar Fredriksson. He'll come in on the hour. Daniel Thomas will go a little bit longer, and you'd think that if he can go a lap longer, he's got to put less fuel in the car at the final stop. Jesper Eriksson will follow, so SimRace Sweden has a strategy.
If we have a right front onboard for Oscar Fredriksson's car, I would love to see a replay of that pit entry because he really pushed the limit, and that's just a straight concrete wall. So he could have wound up scraping it. Now, granted, he could have used his spare car once he got it in, but he was wasting no time whatsoever, even with his pit entry. Daniel Thomas, now for the first time on his lonesome out at the front of the field, while everybody else behind, almost everybody else pits. Yeah, Fredriksson, Eriksson, Shelley, Batten, Baker, they're all in. Only Thomas able to continue an extra lap.
Well, it goes to show you how well he's done. In fact, no, he'll be joined by Tommy Alto, who's stayed out a little bit longer too. So Alto is also going to be out there in the Ferrari, getting an extra lap in under the boards. But for now, Daniel Thomas knows this is a critical lap, this in lap, and what a time for it. 3 pieces of lap traffic in front of him, one of whom is Lorenzo Lamusico, who's back out there after the fast repair. He's got to get by Claude Belval and Håkan Schott, who are there in what is shot 13th, and everyone else around, like Claude Belval, is the last car on the lead lap down in 25th position. So this is a very important time to hit lap traffic, and Daniel Thomas, I think, is going to want to come in pretty quickly.
So far, only 3 cars have been able to make it to lap 27 without pitting. That's Thomas, Guest, and Walker have all carried on. So anybody else able to maybe stretch that fuel just a little bit? Dryline's not going to be it. He's coming into pit lane. Yeah, that's it. That's everybody. So only 3 cars able to make it that extra little bit to try and stretch it to the end.
Joe, do we have to put an asterisk next to Ryan Walker for the fact he started in the pits and technically has 1 pit stop?
You know, Well, I was going to say he did slightly less on fuel. It's very, very minor because it was obviously under pacing speed.
Oh, look at this.
At the start of the race.
Look at this from Daniel Thomas. He's stuck behind Claude Belval coming into the pits, and this is what we're talking about here. Belval cannot be there that quick compared to Daniel Thomas, and he just has to sit and lump it. And he doesn't just have to sit and lump it here. He's got to sit and lump it through La Source, because you do have to drop the speed through La Source to go and get that run through the corner. So you can't get that all nicely sorted. You're down at about 50 Ks to go back up to the 72 that you're required here on the pit speed limiter. So Claude Belval, an absolute dagger for Daniel Thomas's help. And Oscar Fredriksson, by comparison here, is only now making his way through Fagnes.
Interestingly,
Ericsson's
ahead. Now, their pit stop times were similar, but Ericsson was, if I'm seeing this right, 6 seconds quicker from cone to cone. How is that possible? 6 seconds? You can't even, I wouldn't think you'd be able to find that in the La Source hairpin on pit lane.
Well,
How
I want to
get
see
that much faster.
I'm going to look at Jesper Eriksson and see how he did it here, because he was absolutely throwing himself around. And Oscar Fredriksson, I think, was really slow going through on the transfer. So he came through 60 kilometers an hour, and I think he just didn't get himself back up. I think he forgot that he had to put the power down or something, or he was clutching so much on fuel to try and make his box that he had to try and slow it down. And I wonder whether it's a play from him to try and stay close. Now, watch this up the hill, because Daniel Thomas, I think, is going to retain the race lead despite all of that, and that's going to be good news. But Jesper Eriksson now is the main challenger here, and it might be a case of Fredriksson plays rear gunner.
Yeah, I'm watching the time trickle down, and it was about 2.5 seconds quicker for Thomas compared to Eriksson. So, very good stop. I guess having saved that much fuel allowed Daniel to just get out that much faster. But yeah, you make a good point. If Fredriksson sputtered to his pit stall, then yeah, he definitely would have lost a lot of time. So that gives us an inkling of just how tight it is to try and make it on fuel out here. Bruno Rebello, where did he wind up in terms with Ryan Walker? Well, we're going to find out. There's Walker now coming out of his pit stall.
So Ryan Walker up the hill is going to be trying to get on the power quickly and to try and avoid who's around. And look at this. He's got a massive gap by comparison here. Tom Guest, he's following out of the pits. And Håkon Schott is going to go and make his way through. So that'll be one lost. And then he's got the likes of Eric Smith to try and get through, but Walker's cleared him. So that's a great pit stop there from Ryan Walker, and I think that puts him effectively into 14th place out there, or even further up. So Guest is 12th, Walker I'd say is 13th, because Håkon Schott made the pass on the straight, whilst the tyres are still getting up to temperature from Tom Guest.
It did indeed. Derek Smith now behind the 97 car, so Walker with a nice big gap over Rebello. I'm sure he's relieved on that one. Tom Guest just in front of him by about 2 seconds. Could definitely be caught up. But like you said, first, looks like Tom's going to have to battle with the 101 coming down into Puhan.
So that's going to be quite crucial and quite critical, as Tom Guest now holds himself in line and hopes that he can find himself that gain of position that is becoming more and more important. Håkon Schott has been very quiet over the course of this race. We see the gravel continuing to be kicked up through the corners, but that Fusion McLaren trying to get past the Mustang of Schott is going to find it's going to be very difficult. We know how quick that Mustang is. Tom Guest heading over 230 kilometers an hour. He is picking up a nice toe, but he'll get to Blanchimont corner here, and this is where you get that massive sense of, well, how much speed can you get through the middle of the corner. And now here comes the look straight down the inside, and that's where you need to pick it up. Lovely move by Tom Guest.
Textbook stuff from the 058. That'll move him into 11th. That helped out Walker a little bit. 8's down to 1.1 seconds and continuing to gain. Eric Smith with Bruno Rebello Although Smith, I have been noticing some connection issues with, and that's not going to make life fun for the one car.
No, especially with what iRacing's now put into play with connection issues and the iRacing connection flag, which is a black and orange flag with a lovely little Wi-Fi symbol on it saying it's not working. And if you get too much of that and the connection starts to, I would say, wobble about, it's a throw you into the pits, or you can continue out and drive, but you'll drive in ghosted positions and you won't get the laps counted towards your name. So it becomes more critical than ever in an online racing sphere that if you have a good internet, you can go and race at the highest level.
Exactly. And love that that's no longer has to be a subjective thing for race control. Round the outside for Bruno, coming down to the Lacombe, takes it right back from Smith, although he had to get his elbows out once again, just a tiny nudge to finish the job. Smith falls back to 15th.
Yeah, that's what happens when you battle with Bruno. He makes life incredibly difficult, and he will always have a stab back in his machine. So he's certainly looking at what he can do in order to make those passes, and it's very Valentino Rossi-like in the way that he goes. I know it's car number 46, as he looks to try and make those passes. It's so clever because it's at the earliest point you can go and attack back, do it. Attack back, gain those places. Walker now with one of the freshest sets of tyres out there in the field now looks to get his Mercedes past the Mustang and gain that extra position once more. I'm not sure Schott's going to have much to fight back with, but again, going through the campus corner and over towards Stavelot once again, this drive through Stavelot is the one that gives you the run to Blanchemont, and Ryan Walker picks up a beauty. Look at this.
He's going to have the inside. Oh, no, he won't. He's going to fall back in line, so maybe he's waiting for an out-braking move coming into the bus stop. Let's see if he can hang on coming through Blanchemont. He's there or thereabouts, but I think that's a bit too far away. And yeah, he will back out of it, at least this time. He's 4 spots away from where he would have started this race. And I mean, the pace is so good. Yes, I can understand wanting to avoid problems by starting from pit lane. I just feel like if Ryan would have started on the grid, we would have seen him with a top 10 easily.
I wonder what's happened to Tommy Alto out there, because he looks like he's been in the pits for a very long time out there, and I wonder whether he's had himself a drama on circuit that is completely put a scupper to his race, because he was driving absolutely fantastically out there, and it's just simply just gone for him.
Also worth noting that Edward Shelley's catching up to Oscar Fredrickson for 3rd. So could have a battle there. Watching Walker still try his best, but no dice down into Fagny for him on Hockenschut. And that was into Lacombe. Here is Eric Smith, though, just behind them. Rebello and he carrying on this dogfight of a battle. Bruno has been Mr. Excitement in this race, just unrelenting.
You don't want a dogfight with a dog bear, because the dog bear seems to win, and Eric Smith finds that and gets that sorted. Edward Shelley going to the outside, trying to get past Oscar Fredrickson, and that doesn't quite navigate. But a good effort there from Edward Shelley, who's been a stalwart when it comes to the major series, looking to try and put himself in the right place at the right time. But again, it doesn't quite come off the way they want to. And Daniel Thomas, just to make a little bit of insult to injury here with Fredrickson's issues in the pits, is pulling away from Jesper Eriksson. There's not much that can be done in this scenario.
Now, you see Cameron Brown there sitting in 5th, and those who are remembering our grid may be going, wow, he's up from 36. Remember, he probably owes us a pit stop. He was last in 23 laps ago. So he will tumble back down the order, but still, for now, he is flying high. Fredrickson versus Shelley keeps Fredrickson in that 3rd spot for the time being, but he's been given a lot of pressure by that 34.
It's a case of if you avoid everybody out there on track in the same way that Cameron Brown has been doing there, you might actually find you gain quite a lot of time. You don't have to overtake cars as much as you have to, because the way with a 2-stop strategy works is you're building all your time in the middle of the race where everyone's coming in and making a stop, so you gain those places naturally as everyone jumps in the pits. And then when you pit, you just hand them back. It's effectively an IOU, the grand sum of 1 position. out there before you come into the pit. So I think it's quite clever there from Cameron Brown and what he's been able to do. But he did pit on the end of lap 7, start of lap 8. So from my understanding is that he'll be due in about, I don't know, 5 laps time.
And I think that may have been, if I'm remembering correctly, he had some damage, because I do see that he took his spare car. So he was almost forced into this situation. And I'm curious where he will come out. Hopefully at least within the top 20. We've got 27 cars still on the lead lap at this point. Fredrickson looking back from him on Shelley, about 0.4 of a second difference. Definitely a little bit too far for Ed to try something coming down into the final chicane here. And we still have more than 45 minutes left to go, but we're running out of sunlight. We've got about 20 minutes left before it goes below the horizon.
And we keep talking about it because this is a really unique circuit when it comes to being a track that is notorious for night racing here on iRacing. It's one of those that you look around this circuit and you go, well, where's the lights? And the answer is there are none. So you are legitimately driving in the dark, reliant on just your headlights. So I think at that sort of venture point that they look to try and go around this track with, when you have to start realizing, my braking markers that I normally use in the sunshine, I can't see them as clearly anymore. It is a different skill to have driving at night compared to driving in the day. You're using the same skills. In theory, there should be no reason why you can't go as quick. You just have to adapt to the conditions, and you have to adapt quickly.
Absolutely. Visibly, so much is different, even though the track's still the same and it just might be a little bit cooler. But otherwise, you have to really know where your brake markers are. I guess the one consolation as we watch Ryan continue this battle with Haken is that there is no rain predicted for this one, because that would have been quite a difficult ask here if drivers were asked to do the rain at night at Spa.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like doing that. I wouldn't like doing the rain in the day. I think that really does tell you all you need to know. And I am starting to see that the headlights are starting to reflect a little bit off of the race circuit from where everyone's going. So it is getting incredibly dark out there. But again, I am a little bit confused to what happened to Tommy Alto out there. He's now 3 laps down. The other retirees from this race are Anders Utvik and Scott Kukas. So just the 3 retirees from this race so far. But now they find themselves on the back of a bit of lap traffic in Jeroen Bonds. And which way are you going to go, Mr. Schott, if you are going to get this pass? So trying to go around the outside. Ryan finding himself a little bit spooked out there by Jeroen Bonds, and that very troublesome.
I think he was trying to be sneaky. He thought maybe this is an opportunity to do something different, split them on either side. Just didn't quite work out. You got to at least roll the dice on those ones, because you never know, especially since he's been stuck behind the 101 for as long as he has. So as this is going on, they do have Tom Guest 2.5 seconds up the road. So I don't think Ryan wants to waste too much time, although he's probably used to it at this stage. It seems like he's had a couple cars where he's spent forever having to battle them just to get one position.
I know, it's the fallacy that he's run into of drivers are going to fight him and he's not going to get everything his own way. Now into the pits comes Cameron Brown for what will be his stop, and he's got a unique position as first driver of the Grand Prix pits with how far back he is in the stall, which I think actually gives him a tiny little advantage, because he doesn't have to worry about taking that corner as he goes through at last source with any sort of form of drama out there. But now here comes the search once more from Walker, and again he's still not quite there with Håkan Schott, so he's doing enough to bring himself then to hold station. But you can stare behind drivers all you want for the entirety of the race. If you can't pass a car in front of you, you're not going to be gaining too much time by the time the end of the race comes around. That's where Struggle Street finds itself in. Also into the pit was Giorgio Raimondi, who's come in and made his stop. So Raimondi is also come in with Cameron Brown. So those two on a 2-stop strategy to try and get them home. They've come in from 5th and 10th respectively.
The nice thing for Brown is because he was able to take some fuel the first time, it was only 33 seconds this time. Here we go. What's going to happen with Ryan coming up into Lacombe? No, I don't think it's quite there. He's showing himself in the mirrors just to see if he can shake, shoot off the racing line, but no dice. Where does Brown emerge? Brown will be 15th, which is not too bad. That is still a gain of 21 positions from the 42 car. This is a phenomenal race from Cameron Brown.
Yeah, it pays sometimes to be off-kilter and off-strategy with other drivers, as here comes Alex Smith in the Fusion Gold Euro car, straight down to the inside on Roberto De Filippis, who has already come into the pits to try and get the rear sorted, which he lost over at last source about a half an hour ago, and back going. But Smith with a good pass, and Michael Hogg just sits and watches back there in the baby metal car, hoping to try and find a way through, and he'll be going, give me positions and not necessarily give me chocolate, but at least at this point he is hoping that he wants that pass, and that double toe up the Camel, giving him a little look, but having to dab the brakes because it was half covered by De Filippis.
If you're ever going to ask for chocolate, Belgium would be a good place to do so, but I don't think he'll have a chance to come down pit lane for that one. These drivers trying to make it to the end from here. And it is a nice little battle here for 23rd between these three. As we check back in on Shelley and Fredrickson. Fredrickson unable to shake that 34, making life difficult for him, which has already been made difficult by a long pit stop. And has lost what was a shot at the win. He's 10 seconds off Daniel Thomas in 41 minutes. That's going to be really difficult to make up.
No, I don't think he can. And the key here is he's doing 2:18.7s, Ericsson front 2:18.6, Daniel Thomas 2:19 flat through traffic. So I think Daniel Thomas is doing everything that he needs to out there at the front of this field, and that is pick up the big result in the GT race where he's strongest. So he's done wonderfully, but this is as close as you like. Attack, attack, attack from Ryan Walker on a car that is powered by as much as his right foot can throw to the floor, and maybe a glass of Iron Brew or a bottle of Iron Brew, whatever he can get his hands on. But he still can't quite find that move because Schott has got enough, I would say, grunt out of that Mustang. It gallops faster than the Mercedes.
It certainly looks like it has just a little bit better straight line speed. This is what I do love about multi-make racing, is that you take these cars to different tracks and, you know, the Mustang might not be as strong elsewhere where the Mercedes could find an advantage. Unfortunately for these drivers, it's that each race is essentially a one-off in the majors, so each driver could choose whichever cars they want. And they're having to sit with that now that they have taken that green flag. And Ryan Walker may be regretting the comfort of this Mercedes over the bumps is not looking good down the straights, while Vervaien finds out that the turn-in of the Mustang just wasn't as good coming into curve of Paul Frere.
I believe that was through Campus Corner there where the troubles find it. So for Stephen Vervaien, you do worry around that corner on how you get that transfer, because the car's slowing and slowing and slowing. And especially with the gravel that finds itself along the outside of the majority of this section of the part of track, you are trying to avoid getting a tyre that loops in there. So when you're trying to scrub the speed through the corners, especially when you put too much rotation through the steering wheel, as a lot of drivers do tend to struggle with through the early stages of trying to drive in GT, you do get the rear stepping out unless you've got a bucket of right foot that's going to respond the other way. So that ultimately is why Vervaien goes around, but I wouldn't say he's had a bad race. It's the first time we've really had a chance to speak to him here today. He is -9, but he got caught up in the opening lap.
Yeah, exactly. It's just really haven't been able to focus on him with the action happening elsewhere. As far as I'm concerned, that's still Stavilo 1 and 2, if you ask me. But anyways, we'll debate corner names later on as Cameron Brown trying to make up for this extra pit stop. Doing pretty good. He's already up one spot. Troy Anderson has been disposed of. And now he gets to try and tackle Bruno Rebello. As multiple drivers have discovered, this is an absolute bulldog of a driver when it comes to trying to overtake him.
Well, if you've got a reputation of being difficult to pass, then I'd say that's a very good reputation to have. I know a thing or two, Joe, from back in the day here at the circuit of Spa-Francorchamps of being difficult to pass around this circuit. It is one of the places where if you can stick it middle of the road, it becomes nigh on impossible to try and get by. Cameron Brown, though, with fresh tyres, is going to try and chase on down, and he's managed to get by Lorenzo Lamusico for that position. So for Rebello, he's in 13th. He's a little ways away. A little bit confusing with the two liveries, but Lamusico a lap down. There is Bruno Rebello in the number one car because he is there, and he's got about 15 seconds to play with right now, but did lose 6/10 on the last lap.
Thank you for that. I didn't look close enough to what was going on out there. 12 seconds to make up. Yeah, Cameron looking quick. Can he get there and try and overtake in time? Brian Scrivener down in 27th. These cars are a lap down, but these are still important positions. That's Claude Belval just in front of him. Belval has been a part of this series for a long time now. McLaren versus Ford. We've seen that the Ford is good with the straight line speed and good enough to hold on to it this time by.
Yeah, Scrivener started 28th, he's 27th, is a lap down and trying to get that Fusion Silver car to move through the field. But the difference is that the troubles there, lost about 2 seconds to Belval on that last lap. So that's where the gap does start to depreciate in terms of what Scrivener is looking for in this one. Walker still continuing here. Now it's for a top 10 because there you look behind, there is a dog bear that has joined the fight, and it's Eric Smith, who, remember, is on that recovery after the earlier pit stop out there, and it was a long pit stop that he found himself dealing with too, up the hill through Eau Rouge, and now Radeon here, which is a small flick left at the top of the corner, and now this is where the slipstream comes into play. Walker moving across at 256 kilometers an hour. Hawkenschott is just keeping him pretty much level pegging, and now as they hit the brakes into the corner, the room has to be given and the place is made. But Eric Smith was very deep on the brakes behind them in his machinery there. That dog bear Ferrari looks like it's very good under braking to try and make the passes.
Even still, could not deny Walker Scottish Ranger. Just don't roundhouse kick him too high. We don't want that kilt going a little bit too up the leg as we come back down the hill. Eric Smith now checking in on Hawkenschott. He says, if Walker can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, well, if one driver can make a pass, then another driver can certainly join in that regard. And for Eric Smith, who's shown that he's had top 5 pace here today, he's definitely a driver who will feel he is quicker. And look at the way he's trying to open it up. That massive diffuser on the back of that Mustang gives you a great indication of how much they're trying to keep that car planted in the rear down to the ground. And that Ferrari, by comparison, very light and dainty on its bodywork, and of course it will be. It's a Ferrari. It's what it's known for when it goes out through. And can that Scuderia dog bear car find itself that pass? The 556 moving over to the inside, trying to open it up at Blanchimont. Off the road goes Hawken, trying to avoid the contact as he goes by, but now onto the brakes for the final chicane. If Eric Smith can hold this round the outside, which he can, he'll have the inside for the final corner. And ultimately Hawkenschott tried everything he could, but he couldn't shut the door.
Ford versus Ferrari goes to Ferrari this time. Eric Smith on the way he goes. Remember, he started from third, so that incident into the pit lane and then subsequent penalty for speeding in pit lane was hugely costly. That explains why he was in there long at 2 minutes having to serve that. But we head back to Andy Chell in the meantime. This is with Tom Dreiling just in front. That brightly colored Porsche kicking up quite a bit of gravel out of Fanyes.
Give a little bit of love, of course, as we did slightly earlier. We didn't actually get a chance to look at Tom Dreiling. That is the only Chevrolet out there on track at the moment. The number 82 Independent is looking to try and do what it can. It's the first car a lap down in that 24th position and is, I would say, about 5 to 10 seconds behind Alex Smith out on track, which is the next challenge to to try and navigate through. There's a little search from Chell on the brakes. Just going to the SimRacer's handbook on how to make an overtake, and you look to one of the first pages out there, Joe, and it says get wide in the mirrors, make the car as wide as possible, be distracting as you go through the circuit, but don't compromise your line trying to do that, because that's how you lose time. Chell, uber aggressive, too aggressive, almost took the rear completely out of him. Well, that's one way to distract.
Oh my goodness. Well, unfortunately for him, it'll slow him up and he'll have to now let Oscar Fredrickson through. So he'll regroup and try again later. I'm just glad that they did not make contact. I thought we were about to see an accident down into La Source there. They'll get away with it for the time being. Fredrickson now approaching. It's a slow run, it looks like, from Dreiling. Is he finally picking up speed here? Because he probably does not want to allow Oscar through. He acts as a buffer for him. Although behind, that was Chell also allowing Ed Shelley through, who gets loose up through Lacombe. He's pushing hard. He does not want to lose touch with Oscar.
No, he was heavy over the curb, and I think he just grabbed the AstroTurf, which was there on the inside, and he's got to be very cautious about the way he over-attacks that section, especially with the way that the gravel kicks up around that part of the track. So it's always a very difficult place. And speaking of difficulties, David Baker is now starting to look around, because he's just dropped the place to Trevor Vavroski, and an important move for him in the number 10 Composite Performance Acura. That puts him up into P number 6 out there on track, and doing a wonderful job now to try and keep himself in position, knowing that the only car he can reach in the final half an hour is the 5th place car of Garen Batten.
Yeah, beyond Garen, it's 16 seconds to get to Ed Shelley, so I think you're right. It's unlikely he's going to see more than that, which is going to be frustrating, because Ericsson, his closest rival in this race, is going to get a nice P2 and a huge haul of points ahead of him. So right now, Trevor trying to do damage limitation, take as many points as is possible to try and keep him from overtaking after this race is over.
Yep. And you need every point you can, as we take a look at Andrew Schism, who, again, the curb on the exit, the curb of Paul Frere, comes back across the circuit a second time. It's almost a complete carbon copy of what happened to Lorenzo LaMusico.
Yeah, it looks pretty identical to me. Cars now pretty well into the darkness of night. We haven't officially hit sunset. That's about 4 more minutes, but there's very little light peeking up over the horizon and splashing around on this track. Daniel Thomas has been leading now for a good chunk of this race. He had brief moments up at the front earlier. Oh, we got a problem with Raimondi. Who was that he just pushed aside?
So Stephen Vervian, finding himself turned around as they went through, tipped it into the corner, did all right, but there wasn't actually any contact there at all for Stephen Vervian, and that's what's going to be, for him, a little frustrating, because it was a very good drive by Raimondi. He looked to the inside, but it was just the nature of the fact that Vervian was having to open his steering that looped the car around.
30 minutes to go. You got to bring it home from here, and already seeing drivers making some mistakes now that we're getting well into the darkness. Daniel Thomas does not want to run into many issues like that. And I think that is, the flip side of the coin. We said, well, Vavroski has to try and do what he can, and it's unlikely for him to get many more positions. But you never know. If lap traffic happens, if someone has a spin in front of you, that could take out your rival late or damage them. So pushing is still imperative for the 10, because he could see something happen that allows him an opportunity, but he has to be in position.
He's got a push, so too is the 37 of Jesper Eriksson. And you were talking about the duality of the sides of the coin. What about Daniel Holmer out there in the side of the coin that he sat on? Because remember, he started in pole position. He's only been able to get back to P17 out there on track with the troubles that's there. Thomas really struggling here to clear this 3 cars of lap traffic of Smith, Mattia and Raimondi, because all 3 of them here, this is a fight for 19th, 20th and 21st position. So any way he can clear this, I would say comfortably, is not going to happen, because the car that tries to clear first in Alex Smith, if he's clever about it, lets him go at the top of Lay Coombe here, and then we'll try and hang on to the coattails of Daniel Thomas and get by Mattia and Raimondi as picks. But here comes the look from Bart Mattia as he looks to try and get this way to go forward. Now, will he go inside or outside? It's covered inside, so Raimondi forces him to go outside. Mattia now will try and get this launch around the outside, but ultimately no dice is the call. The Mustang falls back into rank and file.
So they'll stay in order, and this is not going to help Thomas. He's still stuck behind them. Another run coming down into Ravage. Late defense from Raimondi. Maybe a little bit too late. Diving deep into Ravage by the Mustang. Can he get the job done? Mattia now switches to the outside, and there's not enough grip, and he gets a hello on his way outside the corner. Meanwhile, our leader, 3 wide. This is the danger zone we were talking about. He manages to get both cars, but that was a risky move.
Well, what's that risk compared to the fact that he's lost a second on this lap right now to Jesper Eriksson? He needed to make that clearance here, and Bart Mattia was very alert to that, being in the middle of a 3-wide situation. He just put himself off the accelerator and said, you know what, lads, you go out there and you try and work with it. Alex Smith was always going to keep his foot in, but Daniel Thomas, with all of the speed in the world, realises right now that Giorgio Raimondi, who is there in front, is the only thing he's got to clear. And Jesper Eriksson, for all of that, I don't think is going to gain too much when you consider as well that he's going to have to try and go through it in the next couple laps too.
Traffic giveth and traffic taketh. So, yeah, his rivals will have to deal with much the same, but again, could wind up with a little bit of a better deal. Meanwhile, last car down to the braking of the bus stop, and now Thomas is free, at least for a little while, until he reaches the next traffic. 26 more minutes left on the clock. Final quarter of this race, and it is not over, even though it looks like the gap is wide.
Well, you've also got to... Whoa! And there's the contact. Smith tilting through and getting by then on what was Giorgio Raimondi, and Raimondi will lose the 1 place, and he very much may lose the second. There goes in the wall, and in the wall. That's massive troubles for Alex Smith. The car was damaged, and he's had a hefty shunt there up at Eau Rouge. A massive, massive accident there for him, and you just felt that at that moment in time, the clip came off, and he had no control of the car.
So much downforce was taken off in that moment. Who knows what else was damaged at that time, too. So, yeah, Smith just was a wounded duck, unfortunately, and could do very little to save it coming into one of the fastest corners in all of racing. Oh, goodness. So, at least that was just, it looks like a 1-car incident. We didn't see more collected in that, but there's definitely some chatter over the radio. I think there's a few upset drivers from that one. Let's watch on board from Smith.
So the clip's going to go here, and now you're going to look around. He's come across to try and cover the move off from Mattia, but Mattia's kept the foot in and has said, well, I've got more speed than you, so I'm going to try and go around the outside. And Smith takes the tap and has an almighty amount of contact to go with it. Speaking, though, of battles going out on track, 3-car scrap for 9th. At the moment, Tom Guest, Ryan Walker, and Eric Smith trying to salvage that top 10.
Walker is 1 position away from where he would have started this race. Tom Guest in his crosshairs. Can he get 1 more? Or is Eric Smith going to deny him and re-overtake? So Andrew Schism has a spin coming out of the final corner. Thankfully, nobody in pit lane at the time, or else it would have caused a bit of consternation there if he had blocked the way for them. But he'll get it turned around after just an awkward moment and get back to racing. So, as we said, this is for 9th spot between Guest, Walker, and Smith. Nose to tail amongst them. A little wide there from Walker. Almost opened the door for Smith, but he can't sneak through.
No, he couldn't jump through, but I think there was a little bit of front-to-rear contact through the corner. In fact, there was. So Eric Smith did take a tap as he went through there at Bruchel, and that now brings everybody else back into perspective. Ryan Walker now has Tom Guest for a nice position now of attacking without having to worry too much about the consequence for 1 move, because Eric Smith is not directly back onto the rear again.
Doesn't need those chameleon eyes to watch ahead and behind as much, but I'm sure Smith, with how fast he's looked, is going to catch back up. Remember, Smith's out of position here, so he theoretically should be a little bit farther up. Will probably run them back down. The question is how quickly. And we know that Ryan's willing to be a little bit feisty today. So what's he going to do with Tom Guest? Is this going to be a decisive move, or is this going to be a little bit more like we saw earlier with Bruno?
Well, we'll have to find out. We're still looking at about 52 laps for this race, and there was the search, trying to find that one, going into that final chicane and up the hill once more. That Mercedes has been, I would say, $50 short on each and every single run up the straight to try and make the moves. It's had to take a lot of bravery from Ryan Walker to make these passes, but Eric Smith in the Ferrari here is looking at ways that he can go and get by. Tom Guest, who's piloting around in the McLaren, I think is doing a very, very good job of what he needs to do just to keep Ryan Walker at bay. In that climb up the hill, it's about how quickly they're going to be pushing, because they are gaining on Jeff Schmeier at a second a lap on that last lap. That brings the gap to 7 seconds. And remember, we're expecting 10 laps left in this race. Here comes the run, and what a run by Ryan Walker here. Moves over to the right-hand side to try and take this one away. Eric Smith might try and follow him on the brakes. One goes through, and will two go and follow in tandem? Yes, they will.
Nicely done. A bit unfortunate for Tom Guest, but still, Walker and Smith carry on their battle as we see the onboard from Smith, and they start to skitter away. And yeah, great stuff there from Walker. It is interesting, this choice of the Mercedes, because like I said, it's known as a very planted, comfortable car. You usually want it on bumpy tracks or tracks with very jarring curbs. And I wouldn't really count Spa in either of those categories. So it's interesting that this is the one that Ryan has gone with.
Yeah, and I think for Ryan, it comes down to, well, if you're going to do this series, choose a car you love. If you get a choice, choose a car you love. And I think that's actually quite clever in what he's done, and he's had the opportunity to rep when it comes to the Mercedes. And, you know, he can give that car a little bit of love out there, and it does have its own qualities out there, which does make it strong. Of course, this isn't subject to any balance of performance checks that you'd have, for example, say, when you look at the IMSA Esports Championship. But I look around and say, well, you choose the car that's best for the conditions, and the best two cars that have been out there have been the McLaren and the Ferrari. The Ferrari of Oscar Fredriksson in third, the McLaren of Edward Shelley in fourth, and the continuing battle that goes on between Maranello and Woking.
Meanwhile, battle's not over here between Walker and Smith. Smith gave it a right go coming down into the bus stop chicane, but he still remains hooked to that rear bumper. Walker just going to kind of fade across, not allowing him to get a really clear shot on which line to take. They hit some lap traffic. Is this going to help or hurt them? That's De Filippis, and he's going to stay out of the way at least of the first car. Will Smith get through? Some flashing headlights behind them as Guest does not want to lose time. He'll let all three through, although it was close.
It was. They got very close to the corner, and that could have been disastrous going by through. A warning's just come through for Alex Smith for dangerous driving then, and it won't matter too much for him, that warning, because his race is pretty much done so. But Smith getting close to Ryan Walker, but not close enough to throw one down the inside and make it happen. Now, they've got to be a little bit choice in how they go about it. Either they can fight amongst themselves here, Joe, or they can go catch Jeff Schmeier. It's their choice whether they want to race for ninth or they want to race for eighth.
Yeah, the harder they fight like this, the more they're going to be held up, and Jeff will be able to consolidate that gap at the end. So, I mean, the way that it seemed like for both of these cars, I don't think they're going to work together to catch Schmeier. I think it is every man for himself.
Yeah, I would agree in that scenario. I think that this is a race where they sit down and they realise that, you know, I just want to get what I can out of it. It's not a case of looking at the bigger picture. I think it's very a case of can't see the forest between the trees, and it's quite apt when you're here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, where there's literally trees lining pretty much every single section of this circuit. Edward Shelley continuing on his attempt to try and stay with Oscar Fredriksson. Fredriksson hasn't really been threatened, though, I don't think, Joe, in racing with Edward Shelley. I think Shelley's kept his cards very close to his chest, but right now, it's all right keeping your cards close to your chest, but if you're never close enough to make a move, they're never going to leave there.
Yeah, is this legitimate from Shelley, unable to catch up, or is he maybe trying to save a little bit of fuel? Eric Smith thought he was going to have another go, but was not quite there.
Coming in.
Oh, yeah, and I wondered about this. I wondered because I thought I remembered that Smith pitted early, so he's going to need another splash of fuel to get to the end. And Bruno, is he here to give us more fun? It's him and Hakan Schut who are carrying on for 12th.
Yep, so that was the pass into the final chicane. Rebello just sent one down the inside. Schut left the room, and for Hakan, he loses out. And again, that struggled through at last source. You try and throw the car in. It's not often that you find many on-camber corners in European racing, Joe, but when you do find one like last source, it's a slingshot through the opening corner. Drivers think they can just tip the car in with maybe 20 kilometers an hour more than what they expect to. And it's very surprising to see how many drivers actually do get shot out of that opening corner and don't have a run up the hill. But up to the Hamptons with Joshua Hampton as he loses out the place to Roberto De Filippis.
So that's going to be for 28th spot. Yeah, you guys should use more on-camber corners. They're a lot of fun, I have to say. But Hampton now going to have to refocus, and get back out there. We're down to 16 cars on the lead lap. Might only be 15 here shortly. Yes, indeed, 15, because Daniel Thomas is just going by the pitted Eric Smith. So, or at least should be close to going by him. Meanwhile, Daniel Holmer just a little bit up the road in a side-by-side battle, and Preston's not going to... no, Preston will have to give it up, I think.
He will, and that will put Daniel Holmer up into 14th position. So my projections of a top 15 for Daniel Holmer after that one incident, I think have come up pretty trumps, I think, there, Joe.
Still, I mean, the 79, 13 down from where he started this race. That incident at the very start, coming up into Radion, that has been the tale of the race for him, unfortunately. And he's going to be wondering about what ifs. What could he have done if he was not stuck with that?
Speaking of what ifs, Lorenzo Lamusico's had a massive smash up at the top of Radion, and his race is done.
That's going to be the latest of our retirements then, joining Smith, Alto, Utvik, and Kukas. So only 33 cars left on the circuit. Not too bad. Spa can sometimes gobble up quite a few cars. It has all the runoff area in plenty of places, but it's so fast. It tends to create a lot of mistakes. Musio, yeah, I've done that a lot of times. Oversteer over the crest and over your way into the wall.
Oh, it is Lamusio. Yeah, that's one on me. But yeah, Lamusio has run into a bit of trouble out there. He's been dealing with a car that's been strolling through the high speeds out there, and it's one of the most unique sections of circuit when you go up through Eau Rouge and Radion, because you've got one of the biggest climbs in all of motorsport, if not the biggest climb in motorsport. So you're trying to go up through a section where you're pulling negative G as you go down at the bottom of the hill, and as you climb up it, you're trying to wait for the car to sort of get that grip, and over the top of the crest it goes light. And you don't really get that feeling of what light is the most amazingly when it comes to the feel in your seat, the feel in the steering wheel, the feel with the force feedback. So the car can sometimes just snap on you and you've got no idea why the car's just gone. Oh, hello.
Ooh, yeah. Is this, swap for position, or at least briefly was. Shelley manages to get by down through La Source, but Fredrickson has the better run off the corner, and he'll slot back in front of him once again. So if Shelley was saving fuel, it must have hit the point where he's got enough to get to the finish, and now he's got another run coming up the Kemmel Straight towards Lacombe. Fredrickson all the way to the right-hand side of the track, hugging that white line, forcing Shelley to go the long way. And just enough space left on the outside. Shelley backs out, although I think he's trying to set up the over-under, and there's going to be a spin from Fredrickson facing the wrong way. Shelley carries on. I can't tell if there was some ghost contact involved in that or what, but whatever the case, Fredrickson now off the podium.
That's all on Fredriksson. He's just looped that all on his own. He's just been out on the curb. He over-attacked the curb, and on the inside of the curb, the rear's got loose for it. No contact there. Edward Shelley helped him around, but nothing he could have done in that situation to avoid making forms of contact. Fredriksson's race, he looked so good at the start of this race. He was a favourite to win this one, and ultimately, he's not going to get a podium as it stands.
And this after his problems in the pit stops, where it looked like, he was going to maybe fight for the win on this one. Let's give another look at it. Yeah, I didn't even think about the fact that the curbs, as soon as you mentioned that made complete sense. Good call. Yeah, you can already see the rear coming around. Nothing that the car behind could really do. He just had to try and back out as best he could, and a slight tap sent it the rest of the way.
It's frustrating when that happens, and for Oscar Fredriksson, it's vital points for his championship that are going to be thrown away with that one, and he'd quite like those because that would be about 30 points that he'd be looking to try and claim back. Joshua Hampton continuing on this one-lap down battle at the moment for position, and at least for the time being here, this is right the way down the field here, 28th and 29th. That's a wiggle through the middle of the speaker's corner, so De Filippis is going to have to let that go. So Roberto De Filippis gets the pass put on him by Joshua Hampton. That puts him up into 28th, and these two trying to get every little thing they can out of it. These are what you love seeing out there in racing, especially when it comes to the major series, because you are just trying to show that everyone up and down the order has someone you can battle with.
By the way, Raimondi has had problems, and we're going to see the replay here out of Stavolo. Car gets loose, overcorrects, and a pretty big hit, and he's already used his spare car. That means that he's going to have to come in and take extensive repairs. There might not even be enough time left for him to get back out. He's only just getting to pit lane now. Meanwhile, back to Hampton.
He's out. He's completely blocked pit lane entrance. He's got no drive to go and get into the pits as Raimondi. So he's obviously lost the engine trying to get the car back, and he's had to tow it.
Just utter disappointment. So close to the finish on this one. 11 minutes to go. Would have loved to see him at least get to the checkered flag. Hampton runs away past Filippis down the main straight. Gets a much better exit to keep himself at arm's length from that blue machine. Yeah, here's Raimondi trying to find his way into pit lane. And that car was severely wounded. He was limping his way back for quite some time through Blanchimont.
It's very tough to try and make it back, and it's uphill as well when you come to the pit, so I think that's really frustrating. We've got this schism battle, but I actually want to point out Garen Batten for a moment, because I don't think he's safe for that 5th place. Trevor Vavrovsky on this lap has taken 0.3 of a second out of him, gets some luck with the traffic through on Tom Dreiling as Cameron Brown makes the throw down the inside on Rebello. That's P11 with the fresh tyres to go and attack the final stage of the race for Cameron Brown. But I do want to point out Trevor Vavrovsky's Acura could be staring down a top 5.
Man, Cameron made sure we don't talk about Bruno any more than necessary, and just made that pass with ease. Up to 11th. Guessed to be a little bit difficult for him to get from here with 7 seconds up ahead. Trevor Vavrovsky, in the meantime, as you said, chasing on Garen Batten. 1.5 seconds between them, and a lot of traffic on top of things.
Yeah, in the middle of them right now is Andy Chell in the number 5 Porsche that they're trying to get by. And then you got Jerome Bonds, who's there in what I believe is the Lamborghini out there that they've got to get through. Then it's Claude Belval's Mustang that they've got to try and navigate by. And then Stephen Vivian's Mustang, which is also out there on track. That's all before they reach Oscar Fredriksson, who's 10 seconds down the road. And you can see with the neon blue lighting there in the cockpit for Trevor Vavrovsky, he's trying to do what he can to pull back on Garen Batten, who gets a lovely run up the hill and can use Jerome Bonds as a way to give himself a little bit of margin. But by the time that you get through here, now there's 2 cars for Trevor to try and clear. And can he just duck underneath Chell? Yes, he can. Has to compromise the line slightly, but look at the time he gained even making the pass.
Fantastic. That was rather brave and trusting, but Shell did a good job of keeping out of the way. Yes, I do love they even show this in the sim, that a lot of GT3 cars now have something similar to this sort of lighting. And for those wondering what exactly they're doing, essentially, this comes from military technology, as far as I'm aware, where they figured out this blue or red lighting often will allow you to see at nighttime without losing your night vision too badly. So that's why they have that. So drivers can actually have some visibility inside the cockpit, not be completely pitch black in there, but still not have to blind themselves looking at something.
I do like the Dayglow Luminous stickers on every single dial and dash as well, in case you ever forget what one of them does. And I'm sure in the heat of battle, nobody's really had a chance to look at it. You just remember Jesper Eriksson, by the way, trying to put a late flourish on with the fastest lap of a 2:17.8. This is an important piece of traffic to try and get through. Oh, Trevor. Oh, big moment. Trevor into the side of your own Bonds, and Bonds flips.
Oh, I hope Trevor doesn't get a penalty out of that one. That would just be absolutely gutting to his hopes on a title this season, because Trevor's been obviously working hard for this one and up against some stiff competition, but he'll get away with it, at least on track right now, as the car carries on. Hopefully not too much damage on that machine. I don't think we're going to see him catch up to Batten, because it's now up to about 2.3 seconds just with that incident.
Why didn't your own lift? That's what I'm starting to question there in that moment. Why doesn't your own just lift, allow him to have it? It's heavy off the curb, and unfortunately your own's in the place where Trevor's trying to avoid it. We've seen it once before at the start of this race. We see it again, but that car upside down and will be out of the race. But you stare down an incident like that, and you just wonder why the lap traffic didn't just roll out of the throttle and just allow the faster car to go through and say, you know what, this race is bigger than me.
I almost feel like Trevor owes a box of bonbons to him at this stage, because watching that replay, you saw how big that snap was. I think if that car wasn't there, Trevor would have been the one in the wall. I think he would not have been able to recover that.
Well, it all depends on how much Trevor would have gone through, whether the car would have snapped out sideways, how he would have been able to save it. But for Vavrovsky's race, it doesn't change the matter of the fact that he still is somehow in 6th position. And through all of that, he only lost about a second to Garen Batten. I think that might put to pasture the hopes of trying to gain that place. But for the moment, there's your race leader, Daniel Thomas, and he leads this race with 5 minutes to go and a half by 6.6 seconds. He has done a truly magnificent job.
I think it's 3 laps left that we're seeing for these cars. Still doing a great job managing things ahead of Ericsson, as we've seen and had illustrated for us. It's not over, even with that big gap. He has to keep pushing and take a few risks along the way as well. By the way, Ed Shelley still at about 10 seconds ahead of Fredrickson. Ed's been doing a fantastic job to look to bring home this podium finish as well. As we watch Daniel Thomas on our screen, still in the midst of traffic, having to overtake various cars to get to the end of this one nice and safe. We're down to 14 cars left on the lead lap now.
Yeah, and those 14 are going to be looking around and saying that they've done well to finish on the lead lap on what has been a very hectic 2 hours worth of racing here. But I think that the way that Daniel Thomas has gone about it here is exactly what he needs to do. If you've got a skill that you are especially good at, you've got to try and run with it and score in your best events, and that's what he's done very well. Eric Smith, P15, gets the dive down the inside of Adam Preston. He steals one and gains another one, but Eric Smith, another driver, qualified the car in 3rd. He'd be looking around at today thinking, gee, I should have been at least in that top 5 at the very worst.
Jake, the drama has started. Andy Chell has just come into pit lane, taken a splash and dash, and is heading back out. Who is going to make it on fuel? We wondered how much of a talking point this would be, and this is where the cards all get laid out on the table.
The frustrating thing for drivers who are at the back who can't make a one-stop work is that the only way that you're going to get better at fuel saving is by getting faster, believe it or not, because those who tend to be the fastest drivers out there also tend to be the best fuel savers, the most economical, because they know how to take the path of least resistance around a circuit. They're not having to jump out of the way left, right and centre, continuing to build on each and every section, using more brake and therefore having to hit the throttle more to gain the speed back. So I think if we're going to see it, the first signs are going to be those drivers down the back of the field like Chell. If we see it a little bit further forward than that, I think that's going to be even more problematic for those drivers out there who think they can get what they want. The good news is that they're going to cross the line with about 1:10 to go on the final lap, or if not 50 seconds. So it's not going to be a case that they have to go an extra lap longer than they thought they needed to.
Guest versus Walker. This is for that 9th position. Walker currently holds that spot. Guest wants it, sitting in behind. Getting now into the last laps of this race. In fact, yeah, should get the white flag next time by for Daniel Thomas. I see him heading through Lacombe currently. So 2 laps left for these drivers, Tom Guest and Ryan Walker. To wrap this one up, and that was Ryan going way off into the kitty litter for a brief moment.
He's got to be careful, and for Tom Guest, that gives him a prime opportunity now to make this move if he wants to. Just follow along through this section of road, knowing that Blanchimont corner's there, and you've got to really throw the car in through. Use every advantage that's available, but ultimately Ryan Walker early on the brakes. That's so early on the brakes. I wonder here if Ryan's slightly underfilled the car there. He's allowed him to go through on the inside because he's got to try and save some fuel.
It's going to be a long way if he's only just saving now. Let's listen in. Oh, big lift. Big lift. Yeah, I'd say that Ryan has just cut it a little bit too tight. It's cost him 1 spot. Cameron Brown is the next one, and we know Cameron's had a recent pit stop, so probably easily able to make it to the end. And then Hakan Schut, who is a ways back, probably not going to catch unless Ryan truly comes to a coast here at the end. Speaking of coasting, I think Daniel Thomas is just getting ready to take that white flag.
Yeah, he finds himself just behind Gary Thomas. So the 2 Thomases find themselves together out there on circuit. So Gary Thomas, who is in 30th position in this race, is going to have to allow one Mr. Daniel J. Thomas to find his position. So he doesn't have to, of course, on this final lap. There is a 7-second margin to play with here from Daniel Thomas, but the way that he's gone about his business today, I keep saying it, has been exemplary. And if you want to get an understanding of what it means to be a GT driver and to win races, you just simply have to execute a fantastic race out there, as Bruno Rebello had a splash and dash and leaves the pits. I think it's just been simply magnificent the way that he's gone about it, and these are some very talented drivers that he's beating. Jesper Eriksson and Oscar Fredriksson are some of the best that Sweden SimRacing Esports have been able to do. Edward Shelley is a quietly underrated driver each and every time he steps in behind the wheel, and he has walked away from them.
Also, Daniel's not getting an easy way past Gary. He's not exactly lifted to let him by, even when he got his nose in down into Lacombe. So this is probably a little bit frustrating. Again, he has to consider that risk versus reward. How much do I push this, and do I just allow myself to follow him home from here? So yeah, we've got a couple drivers. Looks like Wayne Hutchison has now taken his splash and dash to try to make it to the end of the race. Andy Chell, having already taken his, is in quite a fight now.
Ryan Walker's taking a splash and dash. He can't make it to the end, so he's going to have to bite a bullet as well on the final laps. But that's the nature of these final laps. It was always going to be close on 2 laps to go and 3 laps to go, and whether you've got enough fuel to make it. And that's why they set it at 2 hours and said, well, it's your responsibility. If you can save the fuel, go make it happen.
Personally, I love these types of races. Leaves us on the edge of our seat all the way to the finish. Forces drivers to have to get creative at times to try and make the best of it. Makes it a toss-up on what is the fast strategy. But for Daniel Thomas, the fast strategy was to go from the drop of the green and just be unrelenting as he is going to take victory here today in the Majors Spa 2 Hours.
Just a wonderful drive from Daniel Thomas, and he'll be followed home by Jesper Eriksson, who finishes off in second at the end, 4.4 seconds adrift then, and then over through the final corner. Give credit here to Edward Shelley. This is the sort of drive that keeps him in the championship hunt, because he picks up a point here and a point there, and he's a lot better on this side of it, I would say, than he has been on the oval side. But, you know, you're looking around. This was a day for Oscar Fredriksson, and he has dropped some points, but it's not the end of the world.
And some love to Rebello. 22 positions gained, even with the extra pit stop that he had to make. And then Cameron Brown, who we had been watching for much of this, 26 positions. Started this race in 36th and will get a top 10 today and finish on the lead lap with 2 pit stops. That was super impressive.
Well, you just have to respond to all of the issues that you find out there on circuit, and I think Cameron Brown's done that very well. We've hardly talked about this guy, though. Jeff Schmeier, what a quiet run he's had, up 9, 17th to 8th. It's these quiet performances that you look back on at the end of the season and go, this was a wonderful result. And Jeff Schmeier, I think, is going to have a big smile with the way he's driven today.
So we had somewhere in the range of about 32, 31 drivers that made it into the dark, scary woods and came out the other side, at least with a checkered flag. This is a difficult track to try and finish well on, to try and be fast on. And we have seen why here today in even only a 2-hour race, which is more like a sprint compared to some other events that you see here. Holmer is going to bring it home, but he's not the last one on the lead lap. That is Hakan Schut, who will finish in 13th. Ryan Walker, even with his extra stop, will still finish on the lead lap and get a nice 12th place for his hard work. There's Holmer coming home after starting on pole. I don't think 11th was what he was hoping for. Well, Walker brings that Mercedes across the line to wrap it up. And then I believe Schut is, he's a little bit down the ways, but pretty close to finishing. So that is it for our field here today in round 3 of the majors. Really fun event, as we had 3 different tracks for the 3 different regions here in the majors. And the Europeans naturally going to be using Spa with how much of a popular track it is. Daniel Thomas was your winner in the end over Jesper Eriksson today for our final results, and a great race from both of them, especially considering that Eriksson came up from 8th on the grid to finish on the podium. Shelley with 3rd, and then you've got Oscar Fredriksson wondering what could have been, only 4th after starting on the front row. Batten with a P5, Trevor Vavrovsky 13th to 6th too. Nicely done. David Baker P7, and Jeff Schmeier 8th. Tom Guest was 9th, and Cameron Brown rounds out your top 10.
Over the page then to 11th, where Daniel Holmer found himself in the lap 1 incident and benefits from a couple drivers running out of fuel late, so that pulls them up to 11th with Ryan Walker and Hakan Schut there, the final driver on the leading lap in 13th, a full 2:32 off of the overall times. First lap down is Eric Smith in the 5.56. The speeding penalty really put pay to his efforts, with Bruno Rebello and Bart Mattia 15th and 16th. It was then Adam Preston ahead of Claude Belval. Tom Dreiling in the only Chevrolet today was 19th, with Troy Anderson rounding out the top 20.
Schism was 21st, Scrivener in 22nd, then it's Hutchison in P23. Andy Chell with an extra pit stop has to settle for P24, as Partridge was 25th, and then Josh Hampton 26th. Seb Jackson was 27th today, with Michael Hogg behind him at 28th, Gary Thomas 29th. Last car 1 lap down was Roberto De Filippis in 30th. Then you get to some cars that had some real problems today. Stephen Verveijen 31st. Jeroen Bonds, DNF, everybody behind him, unfortunately, not able to get to the finish to see the checkered flag. Looks like we have Jesper Eriksson ready to chat with us, and are eager to hear his thoughts on this race, because just impressive push. Jesper, congrats on a podium, 2nd place today. but what put you back in 8th in qualifying? Is this not a track where you're strong at? I mean, genuinely, I was surprised that you started that far back. We're used to seeing you way up at the front.
Yeah, I mean, for quali, it was kind of panic quali for me. I didn't really have time to warm up, and then I just had to quali, had to get it done, and no more chances after that. It was not a lap that I was proud of, but it put me in the top 10, so that was good.
Indeed, and I guess that explains a lot of it. Clearly, there was a lot of speed there. We were impressed with you charging through. Was that your plan from the start? Just go all aggression and start making passes?
Yeah, it for sure was. Lap 1 was just about getting in the top 5 and then just save on fuel, see where I am, try to be with the leaders. But this is unforeseeable things on the first lap. I lost contact with the leaders, and I think that cost me the win, but that's racing.
Yeah, it would have been hard to make up that time, I think, that you had lost from starting back there. How close was it on your fuel? Because we definitely saw a few drivers need a splash and dash at the end.
For me, it wasn't that close. I had about 2 liters left crossing the line, so it was quite safe for me. I did some fuel saving here and there, both stints, mostly the first one, but for me, it was quite calm. I think as long as you managed it quite decently, it was quite good, to be honest. It was fun, though. You manage something, just not go flat out all the time.
Well, this means you will gain on our points leader in the championship. Congratulations on a podium.
Thanks, boys.
Jesper Eriksson, P2 today, was followed home by Ed Shelley. I believe Jake has caught up with our third-place finisher.
I have, Ed. You sit down today and you look at this result of third place, and it was hectic right from the moment go. What's your first thoughts as you take that opening section, you go up the hill, you take the left, you take the right, and you see the race leaders spiraling back towards the circuit?
I mean, first of all, I'm stoked. Like, I really felt like this whole week I've been not quite on the pace with these top guys. So, yeah, just literally that was 2 hours of like clinging on and trying to like optimize every tenth that I could. And fortunately, I didn't get caught up in anything. But yeah, it was a great fight. I really have to give it to Oscar, who I was having a really nice battle with behind, but I think he just lost the rear in the chicane there, so it wasn't really how I wanted the whole thing to end. But yeah, it feels good.
Well, the result's certainly really good for you, and you were having to fight Oscar really hard in the final stages of the race. It looked like you were sitting and waiting, and then the moment that you put any form of attack together, that's the way that it goes around for you, and you pick up your podium.
Yeah, it was like a constant balance, right? Because the thing with this race is you had to do fuel saving to make it without an extra stop. So, and of course, like you never know what the guys around you are doing in terms of whether they're going to be on track to make it or not. So, we trained with the Forge guys, and we knew the fuel numbers that we had to hit. But of course, at the same time, you're trying to push super hard and battle with these others, and you don't know if they're just kind of bluffing and not actually going to make it to the end. So yeah, it's to nail all of that and to get a coin is just awesome.
Well, just looking around at what's coming up next on the schedule, it looks like it's back-to-back in the oval side. You've got World 600 followed by Speedway 500. So in terms of how you're looking at tackling the next 2 rounds of the championship, is this a case for you of moving more into your skill set, or is this a case of trying to cling on again as you did here today at Spa?
I'm not an oval guy, and fortunately we have a bunch of folks in the Forge team that kind of carry us in the oval rounds. So yeah, hoping to work with those guys and things like setup development and everything there. We've got some amazing people there, so it might be a case of hanging on again, but let's see. I feel like with the ovals there's a little bit more luck involved, staying away from wrecks and things. This was just like a hard grind, so totally different kind of thing.
Well, we're going to wish you the best of luck then in terms of what will go on in early April, I believe it's going to be. Edward Shelley there joining us, 3rd position overall today.
Thank you.
Looks like that's going to wrap up our interviews for today. So we want to give a big thank you to the majors for bringing us back for another season of coverage, as well as to the team today, Jake, Daniel, Christian, and Dougie. Make sure to check out our social media, our website, and our merchandise store. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a moment. As Jake had mentioned, it's the World 600. This is a traditional race that we hold here in the majors, one of the longest races that they have that is not a team race. And that'll be Sunday, April 6th at 11:45 a.m. Eastern. So make sure not to miss that one. It is going to be brutal. Be sure to check out our other broadcasts. And in the meantime, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.
Hey, you know that guy who just before the green flag keys up his mic and asks, "Anybody got a setup?" Well, this is him. This is Adam, and hey, Adam needs some help. On the other hand, this guy over here, this is Steve. Steve is a solid racer and he knows his way around the garage. Steve's problem is time. With a job and a family, he can't find enough time to build competitive setups and to race as often as he likes. But as luck would have it, Steve knows a secret. He lets the Majors Garage crew chiefs do the setup work so he can focus on the racing. At majorsgarage.com, Steve can get setups for over 60 cars on the iRacing service. So no matter what series he wants to jump into, he is covered. Anybody really should tell Adam. See you at the garage.